Cult Following. Vampire Dead-tective Book 2. Written by Flynn. Chapter 1. God damn it, Vincent. Don't do that. The screamer was me, and the culprit was my undead partner Vincent. We were at our rundown apartment a few days after our adventure at the 3rd precinct, and we still had a few bumps with the cohabitation. I'd been culling the cockroach herd in the kitchen when the sun set, and Vincent had silently risen from his coffin table bed. My back was turned away from him, as I knelt hunched over the hole in the wall where the bugs were coming from. There was a can of spray in my hand, held at the ready for the disgusting little bugger. That's when he tapped me on the shoulder. I'd swung around and gave him a face full of rage. Now I stood in front of him with one hand clutching the can, and the other clutching my heart. Couldn't you at least rust the hinges on that box of yours, to give me a warning? I demanded. Vincent wiped the last of the spray from his face and scowled at me. You are too excitable, woman, he growled. And you're too damn quiet. What do I have to do, put a bell around your neck? I shot back. He sneered. I would rather perish in the sun. Believe me, if I wasn't stuck to your life you'd be fertilizing flowers right now, I told him. And you would be a corpse in a back alley, he countered. I scowled and held out the half-full can with the spray nozzle pointed at him. Don't make me use this again, I warned him. He snatched the spray from me and tightly gripped a compressed can. The metal bulged out like my eyes, and I ducked just before the pressurized explosion of the raid can wiped out the little bit of clean air in the room. When I glanced up, Vincent stood there with his lips pressed together so hard they were as white as the rest of his skin, and his eyes were narrow slits. His head lay in a cloud of the stuff. That was really stupid, I commented. This was what my life had turned into these last few days. Vincent would awaken, usually sneak up on me and scare the living daylights out of me. I think he got a kick out of doing it. I would sometimes get my revenge by vacuuming or knocking on his coffin lid while pretending to dust it. After our evening greetings, he'd mope in a corner or stare out the window, and I'd play tic-tac-toe with a pile of dust I kept around so Vincent wouldn't feel completely uncomfortable in all that cleanliness. Sometimes I ventured a conversation with him, but he would ignore me, and I'd eventually go into the bedroom for a nap. Exciting times in my new detective occupation. I thought about leaving him one sunny day and never coming back, but I could never gather the courage to go out there knowing there were werewolves, zombies, and probably other vampires who weren't friendly toward me. That brought up memories of the adventure at the 3rd precinct with all those creeps, the strange books, and the telepathic link between us. I didn't want to run into any of those guys alone, especially that Riven guy. The only benefit to my new, boring life was I didn't feel the need to eat or go to the bathroom, which was a good thing since I couldn't get the damn bathroom door open. It was sealed like a tomb, and I had to wash my hair in the kitchen sink. Day in and day out I felt the same level of strength, though during the nights I had a little more energy. Nothing to do with it except clean, but I had more energy. Even that single benefit had its drawbacks, because I could never quite forget that I now had to use humans as my own personal squeegee machine, if I did want some sustenance. Getting back to the current battle at hand, Vincent ground his teeth together and dropped the can. He swooped down, grabbed my collar in one hand, and lifted me up. I would rather be destroyed than live another night. Our friendly conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. We both whipped our heads to the entrance and then back to each other. You order pizza? I asked him. He rolled his eyes and dropped me to the floor. Answer it, he ordered me. I stood, brushed myself off and sneezed. The whole place now reeked of bug spray. How about you go, answer it? I suggested. His reply was to turn and walk into the back bedroom. I growled and would have gone after him, but our visitor was persistent with their knocking, and the rat-a-tat-tat echoed through the apartment again. I hurried over to the door and peeked through the peephole. The person on the other side was a middle-aged woman in fashionable clothing, with a hairstyle that cost more than my former apartment's rent. She looked harmless enough, though she had to be a little lost to be in this crummy neighborhood in those clothes. I opened the door and smiled at her. "Hi. What can I do for you?" "Is this the Vampire Dead-tective agency?" she asked me. Her voice told me she desperately wanted to be disappointed, and yet relieved to have found us. Yes," I replied. That was the name of the agency I'd inherited from Tim, along with Vincent. I just wished I could return the latter. "Then perhaps you can help me with a certain problem," the woman told me. Her eyes flitted around me, and into the apartment, where a dense fog of bug spray floated through the room. "May I come in?" I cringed and stepped out into the hall. "You'd better not. We're doing sensitive experiments, with pressurized cans." I led her down the hall a few yards to avoid the stench. "But you were saying something about a problem," I reminded her. "Oh yes, it's more of an annoyance, but let me introduce myself. My name is Mrs. George Hargrove. I'm sure you've heard of me." I raised an eyebrow and shook my head. She frowned but continued. "I am a widow, and have only my son to comfort me in my old age. She must have been about 50. But I'm afraid he's gotten himself into a unique problem, and I need your help in handling him." "Wait, so let me get this straight. Your son's the annoyance?" I guessed. Mrs. Hargrove nodded. "Yes, and he's quite a troublesome boy." "How old is the boy?" I wondered. 30. "Big boy," I mumbled. "But how do you want us to help you?" "Well, it's no ordinary problem, which is why I need your help. I'm afraid he's joined a cult of sorts, and if any of our friends learn what he's doing, our family reputation will be forever tarnished." She pulled out a handkerchief from her designer purse and dabbed her dry eyes. "It's so difficult being a mother to such a foolish boy." I snapped shut my dropped mouth and shook my head. "I don't think we're up for that kind of mess." "It sounds like you need to get a hold of the police and—" "Which cult?" I yelped and spun around to find Vincent standing at my side in the hallway. His dark eyes were covered with a pair of slick-looking sunglasses. "I'm not sure myself, but I have this slip of paper with a name," Mrs. Hargrove replied. She rummaged through her purse and pulled out a slip which she held out to Vincent. He snatched it from her and glanced over the words. She studied his face as he studied the name. "Are you familiar with it?" she asked him. Vincent pocketed the paper in his coat. "What is your price?" he wondered, ignoring her question. "Well, I haven't heard your rates, but I'm willing to pay a good sum for your help," she hesitantly replied. "Our price is $20,000 cash," he told her. Mrs. Hargrove and my mouths fell open. That's extortion," she shrieked. "We get paid that much?" I exclaimed. Vincent glared at me and I shrugged. "What?" "I'm new at this, remember?" That caught Mrs. Hargrove's attention. "You? I thought I was paying for professionals." "If that's the case, I demand a lower rate," she insisted. "If you don't wish to pay the price, then you must take your problem elsewhere," Vincent told her. Mrs. Hargrove frowned. "But you are the only agency who deals with these special problems. Where else am I to turn?" "That is not our problem," Vincent replied. I stepped between them and held up a hand in front of each of their faces. "Wait a second. I'm sure we can work out a deal." I turned to Hargrove. "Since I'm new at this, we'll take the job for half price. Will that work?" I asked her. She huffed but nodded. "Very well. I will pay 25% upfront." She pulled out a roll of bills from her bottomless purse and handed it to me. "And the other part will be paid after you've saved my foolish boy." "Sounds great. What's your phone number in case we need to get a hold of you?" I requested. She gave me a card with her name, address, and phone number. "I very much appreciate your help in this matter," Mrs. Hargrove told me. Her eyes flickered over to Vincent, and she scowled at him. "And I'm glad to see you have some mercy on a poor widow." Vincent's thin pale lips twitched down, but he said nothing. With the roll of bills in my hand, I had my doubts about the poor part, but I just smiled at her.
Glad to be of service.
We'll call you if we need anything, and when we've rescued her. What's your son's name, anyway? I wondered. Eric Hargrove. Here's his card. I was given another business card, with his info. It looked like he lived at an apartment in the posh part of the upper streets. I'm afraid he doesn't live at that address anymore and he won't answer my calls, but that's all I have for him, Mrs. Hargrove warned us.
We'll check out every angle, I assured her.
Or at least I hoped we would. Vincent looked like he wanted to check our client through a window.
Then I'll say good evening to you, and await your call.
How long do you think this will take? She asked us. I glanced at Vincent, and he was as helpful as an inanimate corpse. I sighed and shrugged. I'm afraid we can't say until we look into the job. Mrs. Hargrove wasn't pleased, but it was an honest answer. Very well. Good evening. Good night, I replied. She hurried down the hall and disappeared down the stairs. I swung around and glared at the empty spot where Vincent had stood. He was already back inside the apartment, so I hurried in after him. Vincent stood at one of the windows opposite the entrance. I slammed the door behind him and glared at his back. The place still reeked of bug spray, but the biggest bug had his back turned to me.
You're such an ass, I scolded him.
And you are naive, he returned. I shook my hand full of money at him.
At least I'm trying to learn this business and make us some money.
You just lay around all day doing nothing, and the nights aren't any better, I shot back. We hadn't done anything since the 3rd precinct. No sleuthing to find why Tim was killed, no talking with Bat about the book we'd picked up from the shipment at the precinct, not even an explanation as to who that big baddie was. My mind wandered back to that scene on the roof with the strange man in the suit. He'd haunted my thoughts ever since that night, and I couldn't forget the strange look in those dark eyes. If I hadn't been so terrified, and him so exuding of evil, then just maybe we could have hit it off. I sighed. Just my luck to have a crush on an evil guy.
What is it?
Vincent spoke up. I jumped and shook myself. Vincent was half turned to me, with a curious expression on his face.
What's what?
I asked him. Vincent frowned and walked up to stand over me. I needed 6-inch lifts to meet his eyes. The look in your eyes.
What were you thinking about?
I shrugged and looked to the floor.
Nothing.
Vincent scoffed. As much as I believe that, your expression proved that you do indeed think, he countered. I whipped my head up and glared at him.
Don't you ever stop being an ass?
I asked him. According to you, no, he replied. I rolled my eyes and balled my hands into fists. My fingers came into contact with the calling cards, and I remembered that we had a job to do. I know a good way for you to stop being an ass. I held up the crumpled business cards of Eric Hargrove and his mother. We can do this job, and you can show me how I'm supposed to live from now on. I can't go back to my old life, and I'm getting a little tired of sitting around here battling an endless army of cockroaches. So what do you say we call a truce for a while, and see if we can find this stupid son of hers? Vincent glanced between the cards and my determined face. He sighed and nodded.
Very well.
Chapter 2. Vincent took the cards and glanced over them. I couldn't read his eyes and he didn't reply. Well, do we need some sort of master plan for this stuff, or do we just wing it?
Neither, he replied.
He tucked the cards into one of his inside coat pockets, and looked me over. I blushed and crossed my arms over my chest. I narrowed my eyes. What? You don't have X-ray vision, do you? I asked him. I detected a faint wisp of a smile on his lips. No, but in order to complete this assignment you will need a new set of clothes. I glanced down at my crummy clothes. They were the ones I'd worn since Tim's death, and my sudden evacuation from my apartment. I tried to wash them while Vincent was asleep, but the dirt and blood stains weren't coming out. It'd be nice just to get out of these things. I glanced at the roll of bills in my hand. But I don't think I'm going to need this much money. Any safe place to put the rest? Vincent turned and strode over to his box. He knelt and shoved the coffee-stained coffin aside, to reveal the same old boards as the rest of the floor. One had a knot hole in it, and he fit his finger into it, and pulled up the board to reveal a secret hole beneath the plank. I hurried over, and watched him pull a large tin box from the hole. There was a strange twisted lock on the front. It had a wizened old face with hollow eyes, mouth, and a nose. Vincent stuck his finger into the mouth, and I gasped when it bit down on his flesh. It created a single puncture wound from which blood was drawn, and in a second the lock released its hold on the box clasp. Vincent opened the lid, and revealed to me rolls and rolls of $50 bills. My jaw dropped open, but Vincent turned and held out his hand.
"The money," he requested.
"Oh, right." I handed him the new roll. He plucked out a quarter of the roll, and put the rest in the box. I pointed at the released lock.
How does that work?"
"Magic," he blandly replied.
"Magic?"
I repeated.
"Yes."
"Like the books found at the 3rd precinct," he reminded me.
"But this is good magic, isn't it?"
I asked him. He paused and glanced over his shoulder at me. "Magic is only as good or as evil as the one who uses it." "Oh." Vincent put the box back in its secret spot, and pulled the box over the hole. He stood and brushed himself off, but I pointed at the secret spot.
"Why didn't you tell me about that sooner?" "Should I have?" he countered.
I whipped my head up to his indifferent face, and gave him the evil eye. He didn't even flinch.
"Yes, you should have.
I've been walking around and sleeping in these dingy clothes, while you've been sleeping on top of a fortune." "Your clothes are suitable for the apartment," he replied. "My clothes aren't suitable to be caught dead." I paused and looked him over.
"You know, you could really use some new clothes too."
Vincent flinched back and his lips curled down in a frown. "I am in no need of new attire," he protested. I ignored him and circled his person, perusing every detail of his dingy, smelly clothes. There were several areas where the cloth had been sewn to cover tears from knives, bullets, and claws. "Your clothes look like they've been through several world wars," I commented. I leaned in and sniffed the coat, only to cringe back with a wrinkle in my nose.
"And they smell like they're from the Civil War."
He stiffened and glared at me. "I do not exist to present myself well to others," he argued.
"Yeah, that's kind of obvious."
I pinched some of the hem of his coat between my fingers, and he pulled it from my grasp. "Do not touch me," he ordered. I looked up and frowned at him. "You're really sensitive for being an indifferent vampire."
"I do not like to be touched," he rephrased.
"You ticklish," I teased. "I am not." A slow, evil grin crept across my lips. I held up my hands, wiggled my fingers, and my fingers shot out for some quick taps on his chest. In a split second, Vincent was out of reach and at the door. I dropped my arms to my side and glared at him.
"You're no fun. We have a job to do."
"Follow me," Vincent commanded. He swept past me and out into the hall. I followed, and he led me down the broken stairs of the empty apartment building and down to the streets. Once on the cracked sidewalks, he took a left, but I paused and glanced down the other direction. "Uptown is the other way," I told him. That was where both the clothing stores and Eric Hargrove's apartment lay. Vincent paused and glanced over his shoulder.
"Yes, but in order to keep up appearances for this task, we will need a ride," as Tim called it.
"Ride? We have a car?" I guessed.
"Yes.
It's this way." He walked on and I sprinted after him. Vincent guided me down a few blocks to a large, empty lot the size of half a city block. It was stuck between two equally large and abandoned warehouses, with more at the rear that enclosed the lot on three sides within their old brick walls. The place was a dumping ground of ruined cars, wrecked appliances, and even a ruined moo-moo.
"Lovely real estate," I mumbled.
Vincent strode along a barely visible path between the piles of ruin and rubble, and I stumbled along. The darkness of the night was still a mess of shadows for me. Anyway, I'm going to get some night vision soon? I asked Vincent. Perhaps, was his unhelpful reply. I rolled my eyes.
You know, it'd be pretty useful about,
I yelped when I slipped on some trash and fell backward hard on my butt. Vincent paused and turned to find me rubbing my posterior. Sitting on the job, he wondered. I growled and stood. My clothes were even filthier than before, and I still smelled like bug spray. Can't our telepathic link help me get through all this junk? He raised an eyebrow.
How so?
I shrugged.
I don't know, like help me see through your eyes or something.
I was surprised when he stiffened.
What? What's wrong with that?
I asked him. Perhaps you shouldn't be wishing for more abilities. They come with consequences, he warned me. The tone in his voice made me shudder. You mean like having to drink blood? I guessed.
There are worse consequences than the thirst.
He turned away and walked further down the path. I stared at his back with a contemplative look on my face, and wondered what he wasn't telling me that was so horrible. Then I realized he was leaving me behind. Hey, wait up! I yelped. I hurried after him, and in a few minutes we arrived at the rear of the lot. We stepped out into a clear area surrounded by the mounds of trash, and in the center was a large object covered by a tarp. Vincent stepped up to the tarp and threw off the cover to reveal a 1930s-era black-colored vehicle, the kind you'd see in old mobster movies. It had a smooth, slick top with bulging front headlights and a large trunk in the back. Inside were long front and back seats with dark gray leather. The whole car was shiny and clean, except for the mud-caked wheels, and stood out from the trash like a healthy thumb.
Wow, I whispered.
I walked up and ran my hand along the smooth rims and doors. Tim didn't say he had a car. The proceeds from our previous cases allowed him to buy the parts, and he pieced the car together from those, Vincent explained to me. He frowned and knelt down beside one of the wheels to inspect the dirt. I blinked. Tim was a mechanic.
Yes.
I crossed my arms over my chest and huffed. And he said he couldn't fix my car, I grumbled. Vincent ignored me as he pinched some of the dried mud between his fingers.
Something interesting about the mud?
I asked him. Tim always cleaned the car after our assignments, he told me. I remembered the filthy apartment, and snorted.
At least he kept something clean.
Vincent stood and glanced over the car with a pensive expression on his face.
Something stopped him from cleaning the car.
I cringed.
You mean like him dying?
I suggested. He gave a nod.
Yes, I believe he used the car the day he was killed.
The color drained from my face, and suddenly the car didn't look so inviting.
So that means what?
I don't know, he admitted. He opened the driver door. He pulled a key from his coat, and stuck it into the ignition. In a moment the car growled to life, and the headlights turned on to illuminate a road through the trash. My eye twitched as I looked over the clear, even road, and I glanced over to Vincent.
Why didn't we take that? The path is shorter.
I threw up my arms and glared at him.
Not for me.
I yelled. Vincent ignored me, and slid into the driver's seat. He slammed the door, and leaned an arm over the open window. Get in. I frowned, and hesitated to obey. He frowned.
What is it now?
You're kind of old, aren't you? Do you even know how to drive? I asked him. Would you like it if I left you here? He threatened. I scowled and scurried around the car to slide into the front passenger seat. The color drained from my face when I realized there weren't any seatbelts. You'd better go slow or Vincent slammed his foot on the pedal, and we shot forward down the bumpy road. I grabbed onto the dash and screamed as we veered left and right around, and between the large mounds of trash. The road led down an alley between the front and rear warehouses, and in a few seconds we flew out onto the street. Vincent took a sharp right turn, and I slid along the leather seat and slammed into his side. "Could you slow down?" I yelled at him.
"Yes," was his calm, cool reply.
He didn't slow down as we careened down the street. I pushed off him and watched the buildings speed by as grey rundown blurs.
"What kind of engine is in this thing?"
I yelped. "A racing car engine," he replied. My mouth dropped to the clean floor, and I picked it up in time to scream as we drove around a sharp corner at the speed of light.
"Are you trying to get us both killed?"
I screamed. "No."
"Then slow down."
"No. I hate you." Chapter 3. Our car careened down the ruined streets for a few blurred blocks, before we hit the more civilized part of the city. Only then did Vincent slow down to the speed limit, and I slumped down in my seat as the world came back into focus.
"Why him?"
I mumbled. Vincent's head turned slightly to me, and he raised a brow. "Why who?" You psychotic idiot." I sat up and ran a hand through my hair. "Here you are saying you'll do anything to preserve your existence, and then you go and try to kill us with this death car. My reflexes are superior to that of a human, so I am able to speed," he pointed out. "But the car's reflexes aren't any better than any normal one," I argued. A shadow of a smile flickered on his lips. "Tim built the car specifically for my unique driving abilities. At the rate you drive, I'm going to meet him sooner than I expected and give him a good slap for leaving me with you," I muttered. I yelped when we violently pulled over, and the passenger side wheels jumped onto the sidewalk. I whipped my head over to Vincent and my eye twitched. "Great reflexes, huh? Did the sidewalk have it coming?" He shrugged. "The sidewalk is an unnecessary nuisance."
"Aha! Try telling that to the pedestrians."
I glanced out my window, and saw we were parked outside one of the glitzier clothing stores. I turned to Vincent and jerked my thumb at the store. "Why this place?" Vincent sighed and shook his head. "Did you at all notice the way the woman dressed?" he scolded me. I frowned and hunched my shoulders.
"Yeah, really fancy, so what?"
I huffed. "Her son no doubt demands the same level of attire from his comrades, and this cult is one of the wealthiest in the city," he replied. I straightened and blinked.
"So you know who we're up against?"
I asked him. He gave a nod. "Tim and I had dealings with them on previous occasions, which is why you will be the front man for this operation." The color drained from my face. "I'm going to be the what?"
"The front man, the infiltrator into the cult," he explained to me.
"The leader is familiar with me, and that makes me a useless operative." But I don't know how to do any of this," I exclaimed. I gestured down to myself. "See? I'm just a normal shop girl." Vincent turned to me, and I saw a glimpse of his eyes through those dark glasses. It was getting easier to see behind those things. "You accepted the business over Tim's body. Will you rescind your agreement?" he asked me. I glared at him.
"It's not fair bringing Tim into this."
"It is fair if he is relevant to your word," he argued. I frowned and slumped in my seat. "I didn't know I'd be the bait on my first trip out," I grumbled. "You are not the bait, you are the infiltrator," he corrected me. "And if something goes wrong, I'll be the dead infiltrator," I shot back. "I will ensure that doesn't happen," he replied.
"That makes me feel so much better," I quipped.
Vincent didn't deign to reply, and I sighed.
"All right, I'll give this detective stuff a good shot and hope somebody else doesn't give me one."
"Where do we start?" I asked him. "By purchasing the proper attire. The clients of the cult are well-to-do, and expect their infiltrators to look the same."
"Just so long as they don't expect an infiltrator," I replied.
"We shall see." He stepped out of the car, and I hurried out after him. "I can hardly wait," I muttered. I followed him into the boutique, and felt awkward around such fine clothing while I wore my dirty clothes. There was a number of patrons being helped by the staff, who were better dressed than I'd ever been able to afford. I wasn't exactly high on fashion, and felt like a fish out of water, so I stuck close to Vincent. So close that when he made a sudden stop, I made a sudden stop into his back. He glared at me over his shoulder, and I sheepishly grinned and shrugged.
"Sorry," I whispered.
One of the female employees with a haircut so stiffened by spray that it resembled a statue noticed us and walked over. "Good evening. How can I help you?" Vincent gestured to me. "We would like to fit this young woman in the most fashionable outfit you have available," he politely replied. I snapped my head up at him, and my mouth dropped open. He could actually sound and act like a human being, and not just an undead ass. The employee looked me over, and I saw the disapproval and horror in her eyes. "I'm afraid this may be very expensive," she warned us.
"That won't be a problem."
"Spare no expense," he instructed. Vincent leaned forward, and his glasses slid down to reveal his dark eyes. The woman was too busy blushing to notice the pointed fangs. "And perhaps you would like to buy something for your kind assistance to us." The woman was mesmerized by his eyes, and I saw a strange glint of light flash through her own eyes. Then she shook herself and smiled at us. "I'd be very glad to help all I can." Vincent grinned and straightened so the glasses covered his eyes again. "Excellent.
Let's get started."
I was glad to get out of my dirty rags, but not so glad to be fitted like a doll. Shoes, shirts, pants, coats, socks, and even underwear were handed over to me, and I went in and out of the dressing room so many times the hinges began to squeak with complaint. Fortunately, the employee was thorough and had a good eye, and what she gave me usually fit. "How does this suit you?" she asked me as I stood on a short pedestal in front of a half-dozen mirrors. Vincent stood off to the side just out of view of the mirrors. I had a feeling he wouldn't have been seen in them if he stood directly in front. The clothes she was asking me about was a strange hipster style. I wore a tight woolen turtleneck. I hate turtlenecks, with dark dress pants, I hate those too, and a pair of flat shoes that didn't have any cushioning. You can guess how I felt about those. I shifted and winced when the shoes bit me at the heel.
"It's painful being in fashion," I replied.
"Did you want to try another size?" she wondered.
"No,"
I yelped. "Those will work fine," Vincent assured her. I would have treated him as my hero if I hadn't remembered he was the one who got me into this clothing mess. That and he was an undead ass. The employees packaged up our purchases and rang up our bill. I'd never seen so many numbers in front of the decimal point, at least not for clothes shopping, and Vincent handled the bill with the wad of cash. The woman was surprised by the payment option, but handed back our change without a word and we walked outside. The city nightlife was alive and well, as people strolled by in fancy dresswear and casual outfits, all out for a night on the town. Vincent set our packages in the passenger side of the car, but shut the door before I could slip inside. I glared at him.
"What's your deal?"
"You almost took off my arm shutting that door," I complained. His answer was to take a firm but gentle hold of my arm and lead me to a nearby alley. He pulled me down the scummy walkway until we were halfway down the narrow darkened path, and the friendly lights and sounds from the street were a pale echo of themselves. Vincent released me and glanced at a door on the left side of the alley with the name of the clothes boutique over the entrance. I crossed my arms over my chest and glared at him. "Mind telling me what we're doing here?" I asked him.
"Quiet," was his reply.
I rolled my eyes but decided to give in to my curiosity, and so I sat down on a nearby crate. We didn't have too long to wait before the door opened, and our helpful employee stood in the doorway. She stared straight ahead and her eyes didn't blink. The woman mechanically stepped out and shut the door behind her. I stood as Vincent stepped over to her and guided her so she stood between us. I moved closer and waved my hand in front of her blank face. Nothing. She didn't even wince when I snapped my fingers in front of her nose. I glanced at Vincent.
"What's wrong with her?"
"I hypnotized her," he told me. My face twisted into a look of horror and disgust.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
We can't do this, so unhypnotize her, I demanded. He stepped up and brushed back her long hair from her neck. We need her to sustain our existence. My mouth slowly dropped open as I realized what he meant for us to do.
You want us to snack on her?
I yelled. Vincent whipped over to me and slapped his cold hand over my mouth. His glasses slipped down, and they had a dangerous, hungry glint in them. Would you rather I feed on you? I glared and stuck my face in his. You really want to die? I snapped back.
That's the sentence you've given both of us if we don't feed, he told me. I'm not hungry, I countered.
A twisted grin slowly spread across his lips. Vincent dropped his hand from my mouth and stepped back to stand beside our frozen companion. He placed one hand on her back and reached up with his other to cut a small, thin cut into her neck. A trail of blood slid out of the cut and down her collarbone. My eyes widened, and my tongue flicked out to wet my lips. I realized what I'd done, gasped and stumbled back, shaking my head.
I don't want any, I refused.
Vincent frowned. Lying to yourself will cause worse consequences, he warned me. I scowled and bit my lip. I didn't realize how hard I bit my lip until I felt blood stream down my chin. Damn it, I muttered as I wiped the blood off my face. My sleeve nicked my teeth, and I felt they were much longer than normal. There arose a gnawing hunger inside of me that begged me to attack the girl and take the blood from her warm body. We don't have all night for your moral hesitations, Vincent scolded. He gently pushed the girl toward me, and she stepped forward until she stood before me. I stubbornly shook my head and turned her around to face Vincent. Her empty eyes creeped me out. I won't kill her, I insisted.
Don't be an idiot.
Killing the girl would bring too much attention. You need only take a small amount of blood, Vincent replied.
I still won't do it.
I gently pushed her away toward the door. Vincent stepped into her path and grasped the woman's upper arms. Her back faced me, and he glanced over her shoulder to glare at me. I cringed when his fangs lengthened over his lips, and his mouth twisted into a feral snarl. Vincent swooped down and bit deeply into her neck. It was mesmerizing to watch him suckle at her flesh and drain her of her lifeblood. I felt a pull inside me, and a voice told me to step forward and take my share, but I fought the sensation. Instead, I backed up against the far wall of the alley and watched the attack. Vincent drained her for only a minute, and then released his sharp teeth from her neck. He stepped aside and guided her over to the door. She stumbled a little, but he held her up and even opened the door for her. The employee stepped inside, and he shut the door behind her. Then Vincent turned to me, and we glared at each other. You have only yourself to blame for this, he warned me. I'm not regretting. I didn't get to finish because he suddenly towered over me. He swooped down and bit down hard into my neck. I gasped and clutched at his back as he drained me of my life. The feeling was as the first time, both painful and sensual. My soul screamed at him to stop, while my body reveled in the pleasure. That's when a pure white light arose from my ring, and enveloped us both in its brilliance. Vincent cried out and released me from his bite. He stumbled back and fell to his knees while I slid down the wall to the ground, weak from the loss of blood. His own ring was lit with a bright light that connected with mine. Together they created a swirling mix of colors between us. I felt his life energy travel over the connection and into my body, reviving me and diminishing my hunger. The connection only lasted a minute, and the lights faded back into our respective rings. The darkness of the alley swallowed us, and there was only the sounds of our harsh breathing. It was done, and we were in trouble. Chapter 4. I groaned, clutched my head, and slowly rose to my feet. The exhaustion quickly left me, and was replaced by that familiar feeling of rejuvenation I felt the last time this happened.
You could have warned me, I choked out.
Vincent raised his head and glared at me over his glasses. I stumbled over to him, and knelt in front of him. I don't know why I cared, but he looked ghastly. His pale face was even worse than usual, and his body shook and shuddered.
I didn't take too much, did I?
Quite a bit, he weakly growled. I offered my hand to him. Come on.
Let's get you back home.
He brushed aside my hand and raised himself to his feet. His feet may have agreed to the standing, but his legs objected to his weight and he swayed. He would have fallen if I hadn't caught him and steadied him with my side. I rolled my eyes and wrapped one of his arms over my shoulders. Lean on me or we'll be here all night, I commanded him. He grudgingly allowed me to help him down the alley and out into the street. We got a few glances from some of the people, but most didn't want to get involved. I hurried us across the sidewalk and to our car, where I stuffed Vincent into the passenger seat. He tried to slide over to the driver's seat, but being as weak as a kitten, I grabbed him and pulled him back. Oh no, you don't. I'm not getting killed in a car crash because your foot decided to stop obeying you, I told him.
You can't drive this car, he insisted.
I slammed his door, stuck my arms through the open window and yanked him against the door. Stay. I dashed around the car and slid into the driver's seat before he could take it.
Now just hold on.
I haven't driven a stick in a few years. I turned on the car and ground the gears. Vincent winced and grasped the dashboard as I put my foot on the pedal, and we shot forward. That's when I realized that maybe I really couldn't drive a car with that much power, at least not without the roads being cleared of cars, pedestrians, fire hydrants and sidewalks. I screamed as we careened down the busy street. I frantically turned the wheel left and right to avoid the traffic in front of us. Cars honked and people screamed. I heard very obscenity in the book, and even ones I never knew existed. We received the one-finger salute more times than an unwelcome politician. We came up to a light that decided it didn't want to be green anymore, so my foot slammed on the brake, and the car came to a grinding, screeching halt. The boxes of clothes spilled forward onto the front seat and covered us with the fancy fabric. I glanced over to Vincent and covered my mouth to stifle my snort when I saw that one of the brass had fallen onto his head. Things got better when I heard sirens behind us. Vincent, all this time stuck in his seat with his foot pressed down on the invisible passenger side brake pedal, pulled the bra off his head, slid over and pulled me onto his lap. His feet kicked mine out of the way of the pedals, and his hands pushed mine off the wheel. When he had full control, he pressed on the gas and spun the wheel hard to the left. We zoomed out into the opposing traffic that had the green light, and I pressed my back against his chest and screamed as we veered around vehicles going in both directions. Vincent somehow missed every car, and we raced off down the street. I glanced over the back of the seat and watched 5 cop cars with their lights blazing fly through the intersection. 2 of those didn't make the turn and crashed into the traffic. The surviving 3 cars raced after us, and Vincent shifted to a lower speed. We shot forward, and he dodged in and out of the flow of traffic, missing most cars by a hair's breadth, and my heart missing as many beats as it seriously considered stopping completely. Vincent took a sharp left off the busier road, and down into the less fashionable and more familiar streets. The cops turned with us and were in close pursuit. I looked back and saw the passenger cops radioing in for backup. Vince, we probably better go faster before their buddies come, I advised him. His reply was to slam his foot harder on the gas, and I squished back against his chest as all 8 cylinders kicked into high gear. In a matter of seconds, we sped down several blocks, and were quickly losing our tailgaters. Unfortunately, their buddies popped up out of the left and right-hand streets just in back of us, and 2 even showed up in front. Vincent spun the wheel, and we slid down a street on the right. By this time we were deep in Depression country where the apartments were as bad as our home, and the occasional abandoned warehouse popped up with its ancient brick smokestack watching the chase from the roof. I frowned when things started getting familiar. Isn't this where? I yelped when Vincent made another sharp turn, and I tumbled off him and onto the floor. I ended up on my back, and glared up at my psychotic driver. Wouldn't it be easier to just shoot ourselves in the head than die in a fiery car crash? I yelled at him. He ignored me, and swung the wheel around so we made a complete 180. I would have lost my meal if there was anything in my stomach. We jumped forward back the way we came. There was a horrible screeching of tires, and the sound of cars slamming into each other. I scrambled onto the seat, and saw a pile-up of police cars behind us, where those in front had collided with those in pursuit. A few were unscathed, but they wasted time turning around, and we turned onto a new block before they resumed their pursuit. Vincent drove through a maze of warehouses, and turned into a narrow alley that ended in a warehouse wall. I expected him to reverse after the cop cars passed, but he pressed the gas and sped straight for the wall. My eyes widened, and I pressed on the invisible passenger side brake pedal. Wall! 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 I screamed. I prepared for an impact that never happened. The wall slid up, and we careened into a large mechanic shop where Vincent slammed on the brakes. We skidded to a stop a yard from the opposite wall workbench, and I whipped my head back in time to see the wall close behind us. The faint sound of police sirens zoomed by the long alley, and in a moment they were gone, chasing after a ghost. I looked forward and slumped down in my seat. "We are so dead," I mumbled. "Undead," Vincent corrected me. I whipped my head up and glared at him. "How can you laugh at a time like this? They're going to trace the car to us and—" "How?" he wondered. "The license plate and make of the car," I pointed out. "The license plate is fake and the car is custom-made. They have never found us before, and they won't now," he assured me. I rolled my eyes and shook my head. "You guys really planned for everything, didn't you?" "The plans came from hard experience." He stepped out of the car, and I followed on my jello legs. The excitement sapped the energy from me, and I used the car to prop me up. "Where are we anyway?" I asked as I glanced around. The shop took up half the warehouse, with a dividing wall between the other half. The whole mechanical space was 2,000 square feet, with benches along 3.5 walls, with the secret entrance taking up the last half. Oiled and rusted parts were strewn about the floor, and the walls were covered with hanging tools of all shapes, sizes and functions. There were 2 lifts to raise the cars and all kinds of compressors, nail guns, blowtorches, and the like to assist in creating a Frankencar like the one Vincent owned. There was an upstairs office, accessed via a set of metal stairs, and with windows that looked down on the shop floor. Along the left wall was a grimy white door that led to the other side of the dividing wall. "Tim's shop. He created the car here," Vincent told me. He walked toward the door, but his own rubbery legs collapsed beneath him. "Vince!" I yelled. I rushed over to him and clasped his shoulders. His exhaustion was much longer than the first time I drained him. "You all right?" He clenched his teeth but nodded. His eyes darted over the glasses at me. "You took quite a bit more energy than I expected," he complained. I snorted. "And you're the one who attacked me. Why'd you do that, anyway?" "To activate your defense mechanism," he replied. He raised his hand and showed the ring. "This ring doesn't keep me from attacking you, but when you're threatened it will drain my energy to sustain your life." "So it tries to keep me alive by killing you?" I guessed. "It won't destroy me, but leaving me in this weakened position may destroy us both one day," he muttered. "But why'd you go to that much trouble?" "I would have been fine without it," I protested. He scowled and shook his head. "You don't know the consequences of starving yourself. At any moment the thirst would have driven you to take a victim, and you wouldn't have stopped draining them until you killed them." I furrowed my brow and pursed my lips. "So you didn't want me to go through that?" He scoffed and turned away. "I didn't want you to endanger both of us with your stupidity." The tone of his voice told me that wasn't the entire truth, and a teasing grin slid onto my lips. "You like me, don't you?" His head whipped over to me, with an expression that questioned my sanity. "Don't be a fool. I only wish to protect myself," he hissed. I rolled my eyes. "Aha, I'm sure that's all it was." Vincent glared at me and pushed me away. He stood, steadied himself, and wandered over to the grimy door. I straightened and sighed. He sure was stubborn, but he could really get us out of a jam and save me from my own stubbornness. I followed him, and was behind him when he opened the door and revealed a very familiar mad scientist's lair. We drove into one half of Frederick Bartholomew's warehouse. The mad scientist himself stood on the other side of the door, with his hands clasped behind his back, and a frown on his face. "I didn't give Tim use of my warehouse so you could use it for your personal racetrack," he scolded Vincent. "We were followed," Vincent blandly replied. He strode past the old man, and toward the white room I'd rested in on another occasion. Bat raised an eyebrow, and his eyes flickered to me. "Mind elaborating on what he said?" he requested. I sheepishly smiled. "We kind of had some trouble with the police following us." Bat looked past me at the car. "And Vincent couldn't lose them at an earlier point in the chase?" he wondered. "Actually, I was the one driving for a while," I admitted. The old man blinked at me for a moment, and then burst into a chuckle. You attempted to drive that monster vehicle?" I shrugged. Vince was kind of having trouble standing, so I took the wheel. The corners of his lips twitched up. "Vince," he repeated. "I'm lazy and Vincent is too long a name," I explained to him. Bat turned to where Vincent had disappeared into the white room. "And what does Vince think of the new name?" "He hasn't complained." "Very interesting. He generally dislikes change. Maybe he's getting used to it. He's had a lot of it this last week," I pointed out. "Yes, and speaking of that, how are you two getting along?" "I was afraid your lack of communication meant you'd destroyed one another, or that perhaps trouble had done the favor for you," Bat asked me. I shook my head. "No, but they tried." We went to the 3rd precinct and grabbed Tim. I had to jump off the roof to get away, but Vince caught me. "Did he now? How very useful of him. So you managed to retrieve the body, but I presume not without being seen?" he wondered. I furrowed my brow as I recalled the two strange men, the quiet secretary and the suited guy on the roof. Yeah, there was this one guy with glasses named Field, who wanted us to see some other guy named Lord Riven. I think I met that guy on the roof, or at least that's who he said he was. I noticed Bat started at the name. "You know him?" Vince said he was. I paused and frowned. Actually, Vince didn't tell me anything about him. "Who is he?" "I'm afraid he's a very dangerous individual, and so is his secretary, Mr. Ron Field," Bat explained to me. It seemed like he was in charge there. "Is he the head guy at the precinct?" I guessed. Bat frowned, sighed, and stepped aside as he gestured to the white room door. "This may take a while. Why don't we go sit down in my quarters?" he suggested. I raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Sure." Chapter 5. I followed Bat into the white room, and we saw Vince standing against a wall beside a large refrigerator that sat opposite the door. He'd taken off his glasses and fedora, and held a couple of packets with red liquid inside them. It didn't take a rocket scientist to guess those were chilled blood packets. Bat chuckled. "Feeling a mite peckish," he teased the vampire. Vince turned and frowned at us, particularly me. "I have little choice," he quipped. "Oh. No tasty maidens to munch on?" Bat teased him as he led me over to the couch and chair. "Actually, this might be my fault," I spoke up. "I kind of drained him again." "Again?" Bat mused with a smile. "You seem to be making a habit out of it." "I didn't have a choice, he bit me," I defended myself. Bat turned sharply to Vince and frowned at him. "Is this true?" Vincent glared at me but said nothing. "This is the second time in your short relationship. You know the risk of overloading the abilities of the ring," Bat scolded. My face fell, and I stepped between them. "Mind telling me the risks?" I begged. "At another time, but I would like to hear your story about the precinct," Bat requested as he gestured to the couch. I made a mental note to ask him later, filed it under the important folder, and sat down on the couch. Bat took his customary chair and leaned back with a groan. He noticed my worried glance and comforted me with a smile.
"These old bones aren't what they used to be, but tell me what happened there," he requested.
I glanced wryly at Vincent.
"Well, first we snuck inside by hiding under a truck that he didn't want to wait to stop."
Bat chuckled.
"So it was moving?"
"Yeah, and fast." That took us inside the warehouse area, and we watched them unload a bunch of old-looking books. Some of them opened, and these creepy shadow things came out and dragged a guy inside. The humor on Bat's face slipped off and his eyebrows crashed down.
"What sort of books were these?"
I jerked my head at Vincent. "We grabbed one and Vince has it," I told him. Bat turned to Vincent and held out his hand.
"Show it to me."
Vincent grudgingly reached into his long jacket and pulled out the book. He handed it to Bat, who carefully looked over the cover. The look on his face darkened, and he glanced up at me. "And you said there was more than one of these books?" I nodded.
"Lots of boxes of them."
They were shipping them out by the river. Bat frowned and carefully opened the cover. "Don't." I warned him, but it was too late. Or rather, it was an empty warning. Nothing happened. No shadow tentacles or terrible hands. I saw only pages filled with a strange language and grotesque pictures.
How'd you do that?"
I asked him. Bat snapped the book shut. "A matter of practice, but those who are unskilled would certainly be consumed by the dark magic in these pages." I grimaced as I remembered those poor fools. "They were consumed by something," I muttered. Bat looked to Vincent and shook the book in his direction. "Did you learn where these books were headed?" Vincent scowled. "We had other priorities than tracking a shipment of parchment," he reminded Bat. Bat scoffed.
"Yes, getting yourselves into trouble with Riven, or so this young lady tells me," he quipped.
Vincent turned that dark look on me and I shrugged. "What? What's the big deal about this guy?"
"I'm afraid he's a very big deal," Bat spoke up.
"You were right to guess he is in charge of the precinct, though not just that one but all of them." I blinked.
"So that means what?"
"It means, my dear Miss Stokes, that you made the acquaintance of a very evil individual," Bat told me. He looked down at the book and ran his hand over the cover. "This book and all its siblings are no doubt in the wrong hands, and all thanks to Lord William Riven."
"Wait, back up.
This Riven guy is what? The mastermind behind a bunch of evil books, or behind a lot of stuff?" I asked them. "Quite a few things and for quite a few centuries," Bat replied. My face scrunched up.
"Centuries?
Like how long Tim lived?" "More than even those, but not by many," Bat corrected me.
"But how's he doing that without a ring?"
"Isn't that what kept him alive for so long?" I wondered. "There are other ways to obtain immortality, as Vincent is proof of that," Bat reminded me. I gave a dismissive glance at said vampire. "They say the good die young," I mumbled. Vincent glared and squeezed the blood bag in his hand so the liquid spilled out onto his hand. Bat scowled at the mess that dripped onto the floor. "Would you mind showing your anger in a more clean manner?" he requested. Vincent's reply was to toss aside the bag into a nearby garbage can and stomp from the room. Bat sighed and shook his head.
"He certainly has been affected by Tim's death," he murmured.
I raised an eyebrow. "You mean he doesn't always act like a spoiled kid?" Bat chuckled, but there wasn't any mirth in it. "He has his peculiarities, but he's harmless enough to those he trusts. Or needs to keep alive to keep himself alive, and even then he keeps gnawing on me like I'm some chew toy," I quipped. "You said you drained him because he bit you. Why did he bite you?" Bat wondered. I shrugged and glanced at the interesting plain floor. "I wouldn't bite a woman in the neck." "Did you feel any hunger?"
"Just a little.
Not enough to want to take a bite out of anyone. Besides, he hypnotized her, and that's as bad as kidnapping someone, so of course I wasn't going to take her blood," I defended myself. "I can't admire his tact in gathering food for you both," But I must insist you drink when he commands you, Bat told me. My mouth dropped open.
You're taking his side?
I exclaimed. The corners of his mouth twitched up. Only on this matter, I assure you. On most other points we are complete opposites. I stood and glared down at him.
I'm not going to attack people to survive.
What about your fridge here? I stepped over and flung open the door. The thing was packed with blood bags. I spun around to face Bat. Unless you're going to tell me you're running an underground smoothie operation, then I'm pretty sure this is blood. He smiled and shook his head.
I won't lie to you.
Those are indeed blood bags. They're free for you to use, but old cold blood doesn't give the same kick and sustenance as new blood, he explained to me. I flung up my arms.
I don't want to drink blood at all, free, cold, warm or mediocre.
I yelled. The door to the room swung open and Vincent stepped inside. Quiet. The police are around, he informed us. I shut my mouth and clattered my teeth together, and Bat stood with a frown on his face. Riven's men or humans? He asked Vincent. Humans, but they are persistent. His narrow eyes darted over to me.
Perhaps next time you will listen to me. How was I supposed to know the cops would follow us?
I thought they weren't supposed to give chases anymore, I pointed out.
Now, children, that's enough of that, Bat interrupted our battle.
Excuse me while I make us disappear. He strode past Vincent and out onto the floor, where he walked over to a large electrical box on the opposite wall. Bat opened the thin metal door, grabbed a large handle in the center of dozens of smaller switches, and slammed it down. The entire lair darkened, and the hum of the machines died into silence. I focused my ears and eyes out the windows that stood 20 feet above the floor, and heard the faint sounds of people talking and yelling. A few flashlight beams shone along the windows at the front of the building, and that made me realize how close a call we had to being caught. I dared not even breathe, and felt Vincent come up next to me as silent as the night. The silence was interrupted by a sudden coughing fit from Bat. He covered his mouth as best he could, but the noise echoed through the quiet warehouse. Vincent sped over to him, and slapped his own hand over the old man's mouth. The voices outside changed their tone from cautious to one that was more excited. They heard Bat, and came closer to the source of the noise. Vincent scowled at his old friend, who shrugged.
Just this old body.
Can't stay young forever like you, Bat whispered. Now, I don't suppose you might lead them away with your powers, he politely pleaded. Vincent pursed his lips, but slipped into the shadows of the machines to the front doors we'd taken at the first visit to the warehouse. He disappeared out them, and Bat and I watched the lights and listened to the voices. The officers came closer, but their voices quieted one at a time. I could just imagine Vince leading them away one by one into the maze of buildings where, if he had the ability, he'd wipe their minds of any memories of this place. Bat breathed a sigh of relief, and I took that as a sign that I could start breathing again. I slumped down against the nearest table and shuddered.
That was a little too close for comfort, I breathed. Yes, much closer than there ever come.
Bat switched back on the lights and walked over to me with a raised eyebrow.
I haven't heard exactly what started this police mess.
We got a job offer, and I thought it'd be a smart idea to take it, I told him. Bat chuckled.
Just like Tim.
He'd take any job offered to them, and get himself into more trouble than the client offered, but he took the challenge as a greater reward. I frowned and shook my head.
Yeah, but he knew what he was doing.
I just dove feet first into the deep end of a pool filled with piranhas with badges. Even Tim had his setbacks, and he didn't always know what he was doing, Bat pointed out. Was Vince a little more helpful for him, or did Tim practically go it alone too? I asked him. Bat smiled. I doubt you're alone, not when Vincent is around. He may seem like a stubborn undead idiot, but he has his heart in the right place. I'm pretty sure he had that removed so he wouldn't have to feel guilty, I quipped. Bat raised an eyebrow. You're very perceptive. I turned to him and blinked.
How?
We were interrupted by the reappearance of Vincent, who strode over and glared at both of us. "Are you both conspiring to destroy us?" he accused us. "I'm sure both our actions were unintentional, Vince," Bat teased. Vincent wrinkled his nose. "Vince?" he repeated in a tone that showed confusion and displeasure. Bat chuckled and turned to me. "Perhaps you two should get on with your assignment. I'm sure your client would appreciate a quick resolution to their problem." He wouldn't take no for an answer, as he turned us both toward the mechanic shop door and pushed us toward it. "And I'll thank you not to make such a ruckus the next time you visit. This old man's heart can't take too much excitement," he scolded us. We stumbled ahead of him, through the door and to our waiting car. Bat scurried back to the dividing wall door, and turned to us with one hand on the knob. "And try not to bring friends next time without first announcing them." He gave us a smile as a final farewell, and slammed the door behind him. Vince and I frowned at the door, then turned to each other.
"Is he always crazy?"
I asked him. "Often more so," Vince told me. He strode over to the car, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. "Hey, wait for me!" I shouted. I scurried around the front of the car, and slipped into the passenger seat, though not without pushing away some of the scattered clothes. I glanced behind us at the closed garage door.
"How do we get out, anyway?"
Vince backed the car up at high speed, and I screamed as we careened toward the shut door. I ducked and prepared for the long line at St. Peter's desk, but the garage door swung open, and we shot out of the warehouse and down the alley. We skidded out of the narrow street, and Vince turned the wheel sharply so we spun 90 degrees to face the road we'd come from earlier. I raised my head and grabbed onto the dashboard when Vince slammed his foot on the gas pedal, and drove like a vampire out of hell down the street. "Do you always have to drive like this?" I yelled at him.
"Yes," was the indifferent reply.
"Did I mention I hate you?"
"Yes. Just making sure."
Chapter 6. Vincent kept the same path we'd taken until we reached the street. Then he took a sharp right into the bad neighborhoods. "Mind telling me where we're going?" I asked him.
"Yes."
I waited for a response, but he didn't give one.
"Tell me where we're going," I demanded.
He ignored me, and kept driving like he was on a homicide-suicide mission. I clenched one of my hands into a fist, and felt the ring there dig into my skin. A sly grin slid onto my lips, and I held up the ring.
"Tell me or I'll use it."
"Don't think I won't," I threatened him. Vincent slammed on the brakes, and I nearly learned to fly through the windshield. Instead, I slipped down beneath the dashboard, and a bunch of clothes fell on me. I popped my head out of the boxes and scowled at him. "Would you stop doing that?" His vibrant and furious eyes drowned out my own anger, and I shrunk down into the boxes of clothes. There was a growl to his voice I'd never before heard, and it actually scared me. "That ring has power that should never be trifled with, and should never be used except sparingly," he warned me.
"How am I supposed to know that?"
"It's not like you or Bat tell me the whole story, or even part of it," I quietly shot back. "We tell you what you need to know at the time you need to know it," he countered. I climbed from the floor onto the seat.
"And you think that's good enough?"
"How would you feel being led around like a blind man stuck to a vampire, and surrounded by things that creeped you out?" Vincent frowned and turned away.
"Well,"
I persisted. His reply was so quiet I barely heard the words.
"What I feel doesn't matter."
I rolled my eyes and dug myself out of the clothes and slid back onto the seat. "Don't give me that teenager brooding act. It hasn't been that long since I tried that on everybody to get attention." Vince turned to me, and inspected my person with a look of disbelief on his face. "What? I'm not that old," I defended myself. Vince still gave me that disbelieving stare, and I crossed my arms and glared back at him.
"I'm not that old," I firmly repeated. "How old are you?"
he asked me.
"That's not a question you're supposed to ask ladies."
"Then not being a lady, you should have no trouble answering it. Aren't you ever going to lay off me?" Or are we going to be like this for the rest of our lives? I asked him. Besides, don't we have a job to do, or find some people to shoot at us? Vincent glanced over me for a moment more before he turned straight ahead. Have you ever acted? He asked me without looking at me. I shook my head. Not really. A few plays in school, but that's it. I narrowed my eyes and leaned toward him. Why? Because you're about to become a socialite, he informed me. I blinked and tilted my head to one side. Why? Vince rolled his eyes. Because that will let you infiltrate the cult and find the boy, he told me. Mind if I ask what this cult's all about? You kind of looked like you recognized that name that was on the card. What was it, anyway? I wondered. I've had past dealings with them, but we'll need more to infiltrate them. He punched his foot on the gas pedal, and we sped forward down the crummy, bumpy roads. I held on and recited a few prayers before I asked him the questions on my mind. Mind telling me where we're going to get that info? The Boo Bar. So that Mitch guy? I guessed. Yes, he replied. I puffed out my chest, proud that I actually knew something about Vincent's plans. So what do we need to know that you don't already know? I asked him. Their members and address. It would be a good idea to ingratiate yourself with them, so you will be invited to their ceremonies, he replied. I cringed. You know, maybe we shouldn't take this case after all. I don't want to end up on a cutting block, with a bunch of robed people holding knives, and wanting to go all Mr. Stabity stab on me. The corners of Vince's mouths twitched up into a ghost of a smile. I grinned and leaned toward him. You think I'm funny, don't you? His lips quickly resumed their usual menacing indifference, but I prodded his arm with a finger. Come on, admit it, Vince. I make things interesting. Stop calling me that, he ordered me. I plopped back into my seat, crossed my arms and tilted my head up in a perfect pose of nope refusal. I happen to like that name. It's a lot nicer than that stuffy Vincent one. Vincent is my name, not Vince, he growled. I glared at him and growled back. Vince. He took up the challenge. Vincent. Vince. Vincent. Gah. I slapped my hands over my ears and shook my head. Damn it, you're stubborn. How did Tim put up with you? Vince pursed his lips, and from his morose expression I felt regret at bringing up Tim's name. My arms fell to my sides and I sighed. The fight left me. You miss him still, huh? I guess I'm not much of a replacement. No. I rolled my eyes and twirled the ring on my hand between two fingers. You know you never did tell me what was so dangerous about using this thing, I reminded him. He didn't look willing to resume the conversation, so I tried another topic. What about this Riven guy? Bat said he was some sort of immortal. How's he lived so long without a ring like we have? He is an alchemist, Vincent replied. I was glad to get an answer out of him, but a little confused. He does what with chemistry? Vincent rolled his eyes. An alchemist is one who fuses science and magic to create perfection. So we're up against a crazy perfectionist. That shouldn't be too hard to deal with. We just have to spill a bunch of seeds on the ground, and he'll be there picking them up forever, I suggested. The idea of perfection is for the human body to shed its mortal coil and obtain immortality, he explained to me. Oh right. I knew that. I'm sure you did, Vincent replied. He started up the car and shot us forward down the street. I slapped my hands on the dashboard and planted my feet firmly on the floor. So if he's lived this long, then that means he found out how to live forever. I guessed as I tried not to watch the buildings speed by. He has extended his life and youthfulness, nothing more, Vincent replied. I'm surprised he doesn't bottle his secret and sell it. He'd make a ton of money off of it, my capitalist self mused. What is immortality if you can't rule over mortals, he countered. Not lonely for one, I argued. Vince's eyes flickered over to me. What a heaven on earth that would be, he answered. My appropriate reply was to wag my tongue at him. You just don't know how lucky you are to have me as a partner. Vince scoffed. I doubt I will ever see anything of this luck of which you speak. Maybe you're just not looking hard enough. I've got a ton of talents that we can use. Name one. I can make you angry.
That hardly helps us.
Sure it does. You focus that anger on our enemies and they won't stand a chance. I detected a twitch of his lips both up and down. Only I could simultaneously amuse and annoy him. And maybe I'm not that bad of an actress. He scoffed. You're a terrible liar, and that makes you a terrible actress, he countered.
Well, we'll just see about. Vincent slammed on the brake and nearly sent me careening over the dashboard.
Again.
Don't you ever stop gently?
I yelled at him. No, we're here. He opened his door and got out. I looked around and saw nothing but abandoned buildings and rusted cars. If you mean we're at the last place I want to be, then yes, we're here. Vincent ignored me and stepped over to a manhole. He easily removed the heavy metal cover and proceeded to climb down the ladder. Hey, wait for me. I yelped. I scurried out of the car and skidded at the edge of the manhole. I expected complete darkness, but found the familiar torches of the paranormal underground. Oh right, these tunnels, I muttered.
Hurry, Vincent ordered, and walked out of my line of sight.
I frowned and looked around the street. Completely deserted and creepy as hell, which wasn't much of an improvement from following Vincent down a tunnel, but at least I'd have company. I hurried down the ladder, but found we had one problem. I can't move the cover back, I yelled at the figure who strode down the tunnel. Vincent paused and glanced over his shoulder.
Yes, you can, he argued.
No, I can't. Those things weigh a ton because they don't want normal people moving them, I pointed out. You're no longer a normal person, he reminded me. I hunched my shoulders and scowled at him but couldn't argue. The ring on my finger was an ever-present reminder of my weirdness. I climbed back up the ladder, grabbed the manhole cover with both hands and gave a hard yank. The heavy cover slid toward me so quickly I nearly had my head taken off, but ducked down just in time. The round metal clambered into place and shut off the faint light of the night sky. I half fell down the ladder and scurried over to Vincent, where I stopped in front of him with a nervous smile on my face. All done, I announced in a voice 2 octaves higher than usual. Vince chuckled. Then follow me. He led me down the torchlit tunnels to the strange paranormal terminal station of shops and booze. There were a few differences in the decor, with a couple of strange scorch marks along the walls and floor. Some of the shops also had their glass broken and their doors crisped, but the mess was cleaned before we arrived. There was a particularly bad scorch mark in the center of the terminal. I was almost glad when a familiar face met us at the opening to the terminal, except that face belonged to the zombie officer George Romero. He blocked our path and didn't look too thrilled to see us.
State your business, he ordered us.
Vincent raised an eyebrow, but his glasses covered the expression in his eyes. Why? We've had trouble here recently, so anyone entering needs to state their business and be frisked, he replied. Vincent looked around the area.
What kind of trouble?
Officer Romero frowned. I'm the one who's supposed to be asking the questions here.
We're here to get a drink, I spoke up.
The two men turned to me and I shrugged. What? You don't think I'd want a drink every now and then? I asked them. The zombie glanced at Vincent. Is this true? She's a terrible liar, so if you believe she's telling the truth then it must be true, Vincent answered him. Officer Romero looked back to me, and I put on a face so sweet I felt tooth decay set in. He sighed and nodded.
All right, but you still need to be frisked.
What are you looking for? Vincent questioned. Illegal materials. Now lean up against the tunnel wall with your backs turned to me, and your hands on the wall above your heads, the officer ordered. Vincent didn't look happy, but he agreed to the frisking and I stood by him near the wall. Romero rummaged through Vincent's pockets and found the leftover money from our shopping trip. He weighed the roll in his hand, and his eyes flickered over to Vince. I didn't know the detective business was so fruitful. Only if you have the skills to detect what you're looking for, Vincent quipped, an obvious shot at whatever Romero was looking for. Romero growled and tossed the roll back to Vincent, who easily caught it and stuffed it back into his coat. He turned his attention to me.
Your turn, he ordered.
Oh goody, I grumbled. I positioned myself as ordered and he frisked me. When he reached my chest, his clumsy hands got a little too frisky with me. My eyes widened when he brushed against my breasts, and I whipped around and landed a hard punch on the side of his face. My eyes grew larger when Romero's neck cracked, and his head twisted to an angle that told me he didn't need a chiropractor, he needed a body bag. The zombie didn't seem the least bothered, as he raised his arms and wrenched his head back into position. I choked out a garbled scream, stumbled back, and Vince caught me before I fell. That is why zombies make good officers, Vincent whispered to me. Romero tested his head out with a few turns, and then frowned at me. Don't do that again, young lady, he warned me. I hurriedly shook my head. No sir, never, I promised. Are you satisfied we don't have what you're looking for? Vincent asked him.
Yeah, you're not carrying any of the books, he agreed.
Vincent raised an eyebrow and righted me, so I stood on my shaky legs.
Books, he repeated.
Romero gave a nod of assent. We've had some trouble with amateur sorcerers coming in here with books full of powerful black magic, and setting themselves up as our lords and saviors. His sarcastic tone told us he hadn't been impressed with their self-described second comings. Vincent nodded at the scorch marks in the terminal. And the marks are from them, he guessed. Romero smirked. I guess you really are a detective, but yeah, those are from the idiots with the books. They got into disagreements with some of the patrons, and thought they'd use their new skills as sorcerers in the argument. That didn't end well.
What happened to them?
I asked him. He pointed at the scorch mark in the center of the terminal.
Some ended up like that.
They cast a spell, and exploded in a blast of fire. Most were sucked into the books the moment they opened them.
So some of them went out with a bang?
I quipped. Any idea where they're coming from? Vincent wondered. Romero pursed his lips and shook his head.
Not a clue, but we've got our best men looking into it.
As for you two, you're free to go. Chapter 7. Vincent bowed his head and strode forward with me at his heels. I avoided the scorch marks on the ground and leaned in close to him. You think these books are the ones we saw at the precinct? I whispered. Undoubtedly, he replied.
So, are we going to tell Romero about what we saw?
I suggested. No.
Why not?
Because our business is not his. I gestured to a scorch mark we passed. I'm pretty sure somebody combusting in the terminal makes it his business, I argued. Riven is our business, not his, he rephrased. His firm tone told me the subject was closed, and we strode into the boo bar. I only hoped I wouldn't regret arguing this point later, though with that creepy eye that sprouted from the wall watching us, I hesitated even to breathe, much less talk. The thing came out as it had before, and I stuck so close to Vincent it looked like we were Siamese twins. The bar was as full and rambunctious as the last time, showing that even crazy combusting black sorcerers couldn't ruin a good drinking time with friends. I was less scared than the last time, and glanced over the patrons. There was a lineup of movie monsters. Zombies drank with people who smelled suspiciously like wolves. Other tables had old hags attired in black dresses and black cats in their laps. The barkeep had a few loose wrappings around his head and hands, and I wondered if he'd just escaped from an ancient Egyptian tomb. The only monster missing was the vampire, and Vincent fit that role. Vincent strode through them to the rear, but I noticed Mitch's customary table was occupied by a hunchbacked old man with a pipe stuck between his rotted teeth, and a scraggly head of hair atop his head. One eye was shut, and the other squinted at us as we stepped up to him. His pale skin lay wrinkled on his face and he glared at us. "What do you want?" he barked out in a rough, scratchy voice. "Information," Vincent demanded. I frowned. That's what he'd said to Mitch. The old sailor chuckled.
"That's what you're always looking for, ain't it?" he drawled. "That's what you have," Vincent pointed out.
"I ain't got none for ya landlubber, and if I did, why would I want to give it to ya dogs?" the old man wondered. "Because you wouldn't want us to make another scene," Vincent insisted. With what Vince was saying, I decided to take a second look at this old sailor, and noticed the eyes didn't quite match with the rest of the body. They were bright, alert, young, and definitely not belonging to an old sea dog.
"Mitch,"
I guessed. The old man pressed a finger to his lips and scowled.
"Shut up," he hissed.
I stepped forward and pinched his weather-worn cheeks. A bit of makeup rubbed off onto my fingers, and I looked in awe at his disguise.
"Wow, you're really good at disguising yourself," I complimented.
Mitch ground his teeth together.
"I said be quiet," he growled.
Vincent stepped back and looked on with an amused expression on his pale lips. "Seriously, where'd you learn to apply makeup so well?" I persisted. Mitch ripped the pipe from his mouth and dropped the accent. All right, what do you want before you give me completely up for that stupid eye?" "Information about the members of this cult," Vincent spoke up. He pulled out the slip of paper with the name, and handed it to Mitch. Our informant perused the contents, and his eyes flickered up to Vincent.
"This'll cost you."
"How much?" "A lot." "I'll give the usual." Mitch shook his head.
"We're not talking about some run-of-the-mill cult with these guys, and I already did my last favor for Tim the last time you came in here," he reminded us.
He glanced around and leaned in toward us. "I want 10 for this." 10 cents? I guessed. He scoffed at me. $10,000 cash. My mouth dropped open.
"That's extortion,"
I exclaimed. Mitch glared at me.
"That's a necessity.
These costumes aren't cheap."
"Very well," Vincent agreed.
Mitch stood, stuck his pipe back in his mouth and bowed his head to us. "If you're wanting to come with me to my office," he invited. Mitch led us through the door that led into the back hallway, as he'd done on our previous occasion, and turned to us. He stuck out his hand. "Payment first, then the info." Vincent pulled out the roll, and slapped the whole thing into Mitch's hand. The extortionist pocketed the princely sum, and rubbed his hands together. "Now you were wanting to know about the members of the Astaroth cult?" "Astaroth?" I repeated. "An ancient demon from the time of Babylon," Mitch told me.
"But we're not here for a mythology lesson."
"What were you wanting to know about them?" "Who they are and how they can be reached," Vincent replied. Mitch stroked his false wrinkled chin and narrowed his eyes. "Why were you wanting to know that? Those guys aren't exactly considered the Boy Scouts of the cult world. They mean serious business. As do we, but if you can't supply us the information then we'll take our money elsewhere," Vincent threatened. Mitch held up his hand and smirked. "I didn't say that, but I don't have that info in this outfit, and those are some fancy people you want to hang out with. They toss around hundreds like they're pennies." "I just placed in your hands $10,000, Vincent reminded him. Our informant raised his eyebrows and nodded. "True, but you'll still have to wait. Come back tomorrow, and I can set you up with the names and how to get a hold of them."
"What time?"
"About the same time you came in here." "I might need that much to get into my suit," Mitch replied.
"Very well."
Mitch grinned and nodded at us. "Good, so if you're done with me I'll just be going."
"Not yet," Vincent spoke up.
Mitch paused and scowled.
"What now?"
"Gather what information you can about the 3rd precinct. There are shipments coming out of there that interest me," Vincent ordered. Mitch raised an eyebrow. "Those shipments wouldn't happen to be books infused with a whole bunch of black magic, would they?"
That's our business, he replied.
Mitch sighed and shrugged.
All right, I'll see what I can find, but it won't be cheap.
He held out his hand and rubbed his fingers together. It'll cost you a hell of a lot more than those names. Vincent took out the remainder of the money roll and plopped it in Mitch's hands. Mitch smiled and bowed. Pleasure doing business with you, and I'll see you two tomorrow. Now if you don't mind, I have elbow rubbing to do. He shuffled back through the door. I scrutinized Vincent's face and only got a blank answer.
So what's the deal about asking for info on the precinct?
I thought the books weren't that important. Riven is our business, and what he does with these books is our concern, he reminded me. I furrowed my brow and titled my head to one side. You think those books have anything to do with Tim's death?
Possibly. You're a wealth of info, Vince.
Vincent. I ignored the correction.
I think I'd have an easier time getting info out of Mitch than you.
I paused and nodded at where Mitch had gone. Speaking of that guy, what's with that getup he wore? It's not like he's really hiding all that well, I asked Vincent. He doesn't hide from his usual customers. The disguise lets him elude casual observers, he told me. Oh, so like somebody walking in and just looking around? I guessed.
Yes. So he doesn't fool that eye on the wall either?
No. You know, you still haven't told me what's with that big eye in the bar, I reminded Vincent. That eye is the proprietor. I stopped and my face twisted into disbelief. What? Vincent also paused and sighed in annoyance as he glanced over his shoulder at me. That eye is the owner of the Boo Bar, he repeated.
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
I paused and then shook my head.
No, actually that doesn't make any sense at all.
How the hell does an eye get to be the owner of a bar?
The previous owner left it to him, was the sensible and yet nonsensical reply. That's just weird.
Vincent didn't deign to comment. Doesn't Mitch worry about being, overseen by that eye all the time? Why? What if the eye tells somebody what it saw? How? I opened my mouth, thought about the lack of body problem and then shut it.
I see your point, I replied.
A thought struck me, and I put on my thoughtful expression. But what if there was some simple way of communicating through blinking where Vincent was halfway down the tunnel and disappearing fast?
It's possible.
I shouted after him. He didn't even slow down, so I ran to catch up. I folded my arms across my chest and scowled at the ground.
I still think it's possible, I grumbled.
Do you ever be silent? He wondered. Here was a topic I could get into. Me. When someone else is doing the talking. You should try it sometime, I suggested. I prefer silence.
I bet you do.
Be silent. I bet I won't. He ground his teeth together, better than an expensive coffee grinder. You know, one of those grinders that could grind down a bone if you could shove it in them. You are infinitely annoying. And we're infinitely stuck together, but I know you like me, I quipped. Then you know nothing. I rolled my eyes and stepped in front of him, with my hand extending in an invitation for a friendly handshake. Fine, I'll play the grown-up and ask for a truce because I'm getting tired of this. Truce? Vincent sneered at me and didn't take my hand, but the heated anger in his eyes lessened. We have more important matters to deal with, he remarked. What could be more important than averting World War III? The assignment you accepted. We're in this together, remember? I pointed out. My ancient memory must be faulty. I don't recall accepting the assignment. You're right, your memory is faulty, but truths aside, where do we go from here? I asked him.
Home. How exciting.
We can do nothing until Mitch assembles that list, he argued. I sighed and shrugged. Fine, let's go back to the Roach Motel, just don't go busting my cans again. Chapter 8. Vince led me out of the sewers and back through the decrepit streets to the car. We returned to the apartment a few hours before sunset, with nothing to look forward to but stare at each other. I hauled the clothes into our lovely apartment and dropped them down on the coffee table while I plopped myself down on the couch. "You could have taken some of those bags," I commented. The high and mighty vampire followed behind me, stopped at his bed and glared down at the bags. "Take these clothes to the bedroom," he ordered me. "Why?" I asked him. "I wish to sleep." I glanced at my watch. Then I remembered I didn't have one, and looked outside. There wasn't a hint of sunlight on the horizon, or at least reflecting off the dingy buildings that surrounded our apartment building. Isn't it a little early to hit the wood?" "No." "That's a terrible argument." "No. I'm not moving the clothes." "Yes, you are." I slung my arms over the back of the couch and tried not to shudder when I felt the bugs scurry away. "No, I'm not. I'm perfectly comfortable where I'm at. Besides, I wanted to know a few things before you hit the hay." He raised an eyebrow. "What in particular?" he wondered. "Well, this Riven guy's pretty evil, right? And he's handing out his evil books that are causing a lot of problems for that underground place." "What of it? Shouldn't we worry about this?" "Why?" I rolled my eyes. "Because we're kind of stuck in this world." "Well, I am. You don't seem to mind being soul impaired." I paused, narrowed my eyes and leaned toward him. "Actually, you don't seem to mind much except me." He frowned. "Yes, you are an exception." I smiled proudly and straightened in my seat. "Yeah, but that's enough of flattering me. Let's talk about all these supernatural problems. Any idea why this Riven's trying to make a mess everywhere?" Vincent sighed and took a seat in the chair opposite the couch. "He generally makes a nuisance of himself." "A nuisance? That guy's way too creepy to just be a nuisance," I argued. "And he had Tim's body, and one of those werewolves was a guy who told me Tim was dead," I reminded him. "That makes him the most likely suspect for murdering Tim." Vincent stared indifferently at me. "Doesn't that make you mad at all?" "If it does, what do you intend for us to do?" he countered. I shrugged. "I don't know, go to his home and kick ass." "Isn't that what all good guys do?" "Do you know where he resides?" I shook my head. "No, don't you?" "No." "Oh well, what about stopping these books from hitting the streets?" "They could cause a lot of trouble for us," I replied. "Perhaps, but until the time comes when it does bother us, it's best to keep to our own business," he argued. He stood and in one fell swipe he knocked the bags off his coffin. I stood and glared at him. "So you're just going to sleep knowing that Tim's murderer is causing all this trouble, and you're not going to do anything about it except have Mitch ask around?" Vincent pulled his glasses off and those dark eyes stared unblinkingly at me. "You speak high-sounding words, but have few suggestions on how to handle the problems yourself. Speak to me again when you find your answers." I opened my mouth, but my brain couldn't think of a good response to that bit of truth. I was just throwing out my worries, and wanting him to figure out solutions to problems that weren't really problems for us. "Until then, let us both rest," he ordered. Vincent slipped into his bed and firmly shut the lid, shutting out me and the rest of the world. I fell back onto the couch, and tried to burn holes into the wood with my glare, but there wasn't even a hint of smoke. Damn that calm, uncaring vampire for being so right, at least this time, and damn him for reminding me that I was exhausted after all that terrifying driving and car chases. My eyes grew heavy, and before I knew it I'd dropped off to sleep. I didn't wake up until after sunset. My eyes creaked open, and I yelped when I saw a shadow standing over me. I flung myself over the back of the couch and peeked over the top. Vince stood there with a ghost of a grin on his face. I glared at him. "You really shouldn't try scaring me to death. It's bad for your health," I scolded him. "We have an appointment to keep," he replied. I raised an eyebrow, and slunk over the couch back onto the warm cushion. Appointment? I repeated. With Mitch. Oh right. I knew that. We needed to see what he dug up about our friendly neighborhood cult. Retrieve suitable attire for yourself along with the makeup kit, he commanded. I frowned. Why?
That will be explained later. No, now.
His witty comeback was to stroll around the couch and to the door as though to leave.
Wait a sec.
I need to find an outfit. I protested. I rummaged through the boxes of clothes, but panicked when I heard the door open. I grabbed a random box hoping it was a dress, swiped the makeup kit and scurried over to the door. I held up the stuff and had a proud smile on my face. The whole process only took 30 minutes. That was a record for choosing clothes.
Ta-da!
I exclaimed. Against all the odds, it looked like Vince had aged 30 years since I started my clothing perusal. Vincent had his glasses back on his face, but I swore he rolled his eyes as he turned away from me. Females, he grumbled. I scowled at him. Male vampires, I grumbled back as I followed him out of the apartment. One harrowing drive and short stroll through the sewers later, and we were back at the strip mall. I noticed there weren't as many fresh scorch marks as last night. The living idiots who bought the books figured they didn't want to go up in smoke, like their fellow buyers. Romero met us at the end of the tunnel to give us a good frisking. First though, he nodded at the clothes and makeup boxes in my hand, which Vincent made me carry all the way down there.
What's in those? He asked me.
Overpriced clothes and some nasty makeup, I replied. Romero actually cracked a smile. Never thought I'd live long enough to hear a woman refer to clothes as overpriced.
Then you need to get out more, I teased.
The grin slipped off his face.
Not allowed to leave the sewers much except during the night, but do you mind if I take a look inside those boxes?
Can't be too careful. No problem, but why can't you guys leave the sewers? I asked him, while I handed over the boxes to him. Romero stepped over to an old card table and opened the boxes. Our appearances would cause a panic, he explained to me.
So how do you guys handle supernatural crimes above this place?
I wondered. We leave that to the humans to flush them down here, and there are werewolves policemen who assist us in doing that, he replied. I frowned as I recalled the werewolves on Riven's payroll.
I don't think the werewolves.
Quiet, came Vincent's voice inside my head. I jumped at the sudden intrusion into my thoughts, and whipped my head around to glare at him. Do you mind? Be quiet, he ordered me. No, could you please stop doing that? It creeps me out, I demanded. Are you all right? Romero interrupted our one-sided conversation. The concerned expression told me how one-sided it had appeared, what with me glaring at Vincent, and he standing impassively by not moving an inch. You couldn't even tell he was staring at me from behind those dark glasses. I plastered a large child-scaring grin on my face, and silently wishes bodily harm on Vincent. Not enough that I could feel it, but something. Maybe I could buy myself a voodoo doll in one of these stores.
Oh, it's nothing.
Sometimes the voices in my head get a little too loud and annoying. I shot Vincent a glare that would have turned any normal man to stone. Unfortunately, he was neither normal nor a man, so he survived. I see, Romero replied, though his voice sounded dubious. He handed me back my searched boxes. Enjoy your stay at the mall? Thanks, I grumbled. Vince led the way to the boo bar, but I grabbed his arm and stopped him before we went into Spook Central.
What was the deal with that telepathy stuff?
I asked him. The police don't need to know about the werewolves working for Riven, he told me.
Ah, yeah, they do.
Romero said those guys were supposed to be good guys, but we know they're not. Why shouldn't we tell him the truth? I wondered. We have no evidence to back up our claims, and the Parasquad would need evidence before they could risk exposing themselves to the world, he replied.
Then why can't we get some pictures or paw prints over at 3rd Precinct?
I suggested. Vincent shook his head. After our infiltration of the building, Riven won't be as careless with his security. He'll have set up guards outside who aren't werewolves, and hid his dogs inside the building. I folded my arms across my chest and frowned at him.
So let me guess.
We not tell them about this problem too, because it's not our problem yet? Precisely.
We're stacking up a lot of problems that aren't our problems but might be someday, I pointed out.
When that day comes we will at least know our problems, Vincent counted. He passed by me and into the boo bar. And what a damn bursting it'll be, I grumbled as I followed him inside. Chapter 9. We found Mitch sitting comfortably at his usual table, and wearing a normal set of dress clothes complete with dinner jacket and black bow tie. He saw us coming, and slipped into his office in the rear tunnel, and we followed. Mitch stood off to the side and pulled out a small notebook. I got what you wanted, he told us. He dangled the notebook in front of Vincent, but when the vampire tried to grab it, Mitch pulled it back. They've let in a lot of new members, so it cost a little more than I expected to get all the dirt on them. I'll need a little more dough to make up for the loss. He held out his hand expecting a large tip. Vincent glanced down at the hand with an impassive expression, then looked up into Mitch's face. Mitch rolled his eyes. Come on, just a few thousand or so. Vincent said nothing, and Mitch sighed and forked over the notebook. You're a real ass, you know that? I do, I spoke up. Mitch smiled, and bowed his head at me in appreciation. Meanwhile, Vincent flipped through the notes and stopped on one of the pages.
What do you know about Eric Hargrove? He asked Mitch.
My eyes widened, and I hopped beside Vincent to peer over his shoulder at the book.
Is he on there?
I wondered. Sure enough, his name was at the top of one of the pages, along with a list of information. There was the date he joined, who vouched for him, and what level he stood in the order hierarchy. There was even a picture of the kid clipped to the page. I spotted a list of quirks, such as his being a mama's boy, and a wannabe player. Everything was there except for his address. That part was blank. Mitch shrugged. He's one of the newbies, but I'd call him a little special.
Special how?
I asked him. He nodded at the notebook. Look at who picked him up. I glanced at the name. Gabriel Sins, I read aloud. Didn't sound familiar.
What's so special about that?
Vincent frowned and snapped the notebook shut. Sins is the leader of the cult, he told me. I raised an eyebrow.
Oh, so that means what exactly?
It means, Mitch spoke up as he stepped forward, that this boy must be special or at least useful. Sins doesn't pick up just anybody for his little club, and who he picks up usually ends up dead. The color drained from my face. Dead. I gulped.
Yep, dead, Mitch replied.
Don't know why, but usually there's a body part found here and there, but not all of it. Wait, if everybody knows that Sins kills people, then why hasn't anybody stopped him? I asked them. Mitch rolled his eyes.
We're not dealing with some two-bit drug dealer.
This Sins guy is serious stuff. If you try to mess with him and what he wants, then you end up dead too. I glanced up at Vincent. You said you messed with them a few times. How'd you make it out? Mitch snorted. You're talking to somebody who's already dead.
He don't have much to fear. What did you learn about the precinct?
Vincent brought up. Mitch's playfulness dropped from his face, and he leaned back with his lips pursed tightly together. You must know something even I don't, because my sources dug up a connection between the precinct and your cult. Vincent raised an eyebrow.
What connection?
Seems there's been shipments from the precinct to one of the warehouses owned by a prominent member of the cult, Mitch told us. A few days after the shipment arrives, there's a big spike in the number of those books out on the streets.
That must be where the books are going from the river,
I exclaimed. Vincent glared me into silence, but Mitch was interested. Yeah, the shipment comes in from the river. He glanced from me to Vincent and back to me. You two care to share your info? I'll give a good discount on my next snitch, he offered.
Not interested, Vincent replied.
Mitch shrugged and sighed. Oh well, can't blame a guy for trying to get ahead on the info scene. He glanced at his watch and straightened his jacket. But if our transaction is finished, then I've got some other customers waiting for my special skills. If you'll excuse me. He smiled, bowed to us, and left us in the tunnel. I have to admit that after that talk, my confidence in this mission was a little shaken, and so was I. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to keep from shivering from fear. It was one thing to deal with the guys at the 3rd Precinct, where I didn't know the full danger, but I knew what the stakes were here. Vincent stuffed the notebook into his jacket and glanced down at me. Having second thoughts, he asked me. I shakily smiled and shrugged. Maybe. I squeaked. Vincent stared at me, with an expression with more pity than I'd ever seen in them. I didn't like pity. What? I can be a little scared. Fear is very human, he mused. I rolled my eyes. I know, I'm just a weak human, and the weakest link in our wonderful relationship. I nearly jumped out of my skin when he put a heavy hand on my shoulder. His voice was soft, almost too soft for me to hear. Tim was frightened the first time, he told me. My eyes widened. Really? I didn't even know Tim knew what fear was. Vincent chuckled, and I didn't hear the usual sarcasm or teasing in its depths. He wouldn't admit it, but I could see it in his eyes. So what did you do? Tell him there's worse things than death to fear? I asked him. I told him to stop acting like a scared woman and do the job. My shoulders slumped and I rolled my eyes. What encouraging words, I sarcastically quipped. Tim said much the same thing, but he performed the job, Vince replied. I sighed and pursed my lips together. I suppose you're right. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? We could both perish. Thanks. That makes me feel so much better. You're welcome. I hate you. So I've heard. I swept his hand off my shoulder and tucked the boxes beneath my arm. So what do we do now? I asked him. One side of his mouth slipped up into a crooked, evil grin. Now you infiltrate the cult. I frowned. You mean we, don't you? We go together. I mean what I say, and I already said they are familiar with me, Vincent reminded me. I gulped. So I really go it alone? Unless you would go back on our commission and our word to help Mrs. Hargrove, he replied. My shoulders slumped and I sighed. Fine, let the espionage begin. I furrowed my brow and tapped my chin. How does this stuff work anyway? I mean, how do we start? We already have the proper attire for you, so the next step is to dress the part and ingratiate yourself with a member. I stuck out my tongue. So I really have to put this dress on? Yes. Fine, but we should have asked for more money, I grumbled. It was your fault we didn't earn our usual commission, he reminded me. You're just a wealth of good feelings tonight. I try. Please stop. I glanced at the boxes, and then around us at the tunnel. Please tell me this isn't the changing room. Follow me. Vincent led me back through the boo bar, and into a nearby clothing store. There were all kinds of frightful apparel inside, including goth collars, black and heavy steel-toed boots, and dresses that would have fit right in with a mourning family. Vincent guided me past the racks of wrecks, and to the back where there were a few changing rooms that were hardly cleaner than the tunnels around the mall. He stopped and nodded at them. Those will work. I cringed. Can't we just go? He stared at me with indifference and impatience, and I sighed. Fine, just wait here. I slipped into one of the dirty rooms, and cringed at the broken mirror on one wall. It showed a nervous woman, who really just wanted to go home and hide under her bed covers. I sighed and dove into the mystery of the box I'd grabbed at the last minute. I pulled off the lid and gazed down at a wine-colored dress. It looked decent, so I took the dress out of its box and held it up to the weak light before the mirror. The dress was more lingerie than outfit. The fabric was so thin it was almost transparent, and there was a slit along the bottom of one side that traveled all the way up to my hip. I didn't remember trying this on, and suspected buying it was a conspiracy between Vincent and the shop girl he later used as an unwilling blood donor.
"How did you ever get into this life, Liz?"
I muttered to myself. My reflection didn't have an answer, so I got to work putting on the dress. It wasn't too hard, there were only 2 straps to worry about. I couldn't even wear about my bra. The shoes were murder, or would cause one if I had to wear them for very long. There was also a pair of long red gloves that reached up to my elbows. I thought about ditching those, but remembered they would hide the ring stuck on my finger. I looked at the makeup kit box and shrugged. I had no idea how to apply that stuff, so I had to go au natural. It took me a few minutes to get through the process, and lo and behold, when I stepped out, Vince was gone. I frowned, took a few cautious steps onto the floor, and glanced over the clothing racks. Nothing. "Vince," I whispered. "Vince." Silence. I wondered if he was attacking another shop girl, and if he was, I didn't want to be around to take the heat. I grabbed my ordinary clothes and strode out of the store to the mall's main thoroughfare. There were a few other shoppers, and 1 or 2 drunks from the bar. I didn't want to imagine how much they imbibed to get as tipsy as they were when one stumbled into my back.
"Where are you going?"
a voice behind me asked. My clothes and makeup kit clattered to the hard ground, and I spun around to glare at Vincent, who stood behind me. "Didn't I tell you 1,000,000 times not to scare me like that?" I scolded him. I expected a snarky reply, but he continued to stare at me with that intense expression on his face. "What? Is my neckline too low?" I glanced down at myself. The dress was a little risque, but it hid enough assets to tease men. Vincent snapped out of his hypnosis and coughed.
"Not 1,000,000, he replied.
There was that snarky reply. I blinked.
"Not 1,000,000 what?"
I asked him. "You haven't told me 1,000,000 times not to scare you like that," he explained. I rolled my eyes, stooped down, and scooped up my boxes.
"Well, I told you a lot, so knock it off."
"Besides, where the hell have you been?" "I've been looking all over for you." Vincent's lips twitched and he turned away. I thought I detected a hint of embarrassment.
"I went on an errand."
I leaned in close and narrowed my eyes. "For what?" I persisted. He frowned, dug into his jacket, and pulled out a short, thin rectangular box covered in red felt.
"For something to complete your disguise."
He tossed it at me, and again I dropped my makeup kit and old clothes to catch it. I juggled the narrow box for a moment, before clasping it between both hands. His action was nonchalant, but his face was tense. Brimming over with curiosity, I opened the box and gasped when my eyes beheld a beautiful ruby necklace. The glittering white gold chain glistened against the pale interior felt of the box, and the large rub in the center shone like 1,000 lights in the gloomy darkness of the tunnel. I snapped my head up and my mouth flapped like a fish on land.
"But why, how?
I stuttered. "It finishes your disguise," he repeated. A wide grin slipped onto my face, and I squealed with joy and jumped at him. I wrapped my arms around his neck and pecked a kiss on his placed cheek before sliding to the ground. "Thank you so much. It's beautiful, and pretty, and the best present anyone's ever given to me." His pale face developed a faint hint of blushing on those white cheeks. "It finishes your disguise, nothing more," he insisted. I wagged my eyebrows and winked.
"Sure it does."
"I'm sure without it, I wouldn't have been able to pass myself off as a rich girl."
"Yes, that's precisely it," he eagerly agreed.
I chuckled, shook my head, and tightly but gently gripped a small box in hand.
"Well, I still appreciate this really nice addition to my costume, and I suppose it's a good enough excuse for abandoning me in this creepy mall."
I glanced down at the present one last time with a small smile on my face, before I securely closed the lid and glanced up at Vincent.
"So now that I'm all dressed up, what now?"
We introduce you to a member, and you ingratiate yourself with them, he told me. I frowned at the sexual meaning in his words. I'm not going all the way with anybody, even for that much money, I refused. Vincent looked me up and down, and I blushed and pulled up my low neckline.
Stop looking at me like I'm a blood bag, I ordered him.
You'll have to tolerate those looks to attach yourself to the arm of one of the members, he pointed out. I sighed and my shoulders slumped.
This is going to be as much fun as those giants, I muttered.
Chapter 10. Vincent led me back to the car, and we drove to the glitziest part of the city. The people who walked the streets wore shoes that cost as much as a down payment on a house, and the jewelry of those going to the theater were worth small kingly fortunes. The shops rose up from the clean streets in dazzling splendor with their fancy lights flashing, and the sidewalks crowded with the affluent on their way to the majestic theaters or out for a fine dinner with starvation-sized servings of fish and vegetables. Vincent parked the car a half-block down from one of the priciest and busiest restaurants. I could see a long line of people waiting to enter, and I wondered how many birthdays they'd celebrated while standing there. Vincent stepped out of the car, and I followed suit with all the nervousness of a girl on her first blind date. He moved around to my side of the car and took the necklace box grasped in my hands. I watched him take out the necklace and gently wrap it around my throat. He had a lot of experience with throats, and quickly closed the clasp. I glanced nervously down at myself.
Well, how do I look?
I asked him. Too pale, he commented. I snorted. Don't you like your woman a little pasty? I prefer mine with blood, he replied. Vincent leaned past me and grabbed the makeup kit from the seat. He then grabbed my arm and guided me into a nearby alley. Even that place was clean, at least for an alley. No puddles, broken crates, or any signs of rats. He let me go, and dug through the various makeup scissors, pincers, and other stuff I couldn't recognize that resembled torture devices. I looked around at the alley. Nice place for a blood drinking. I froze and slapped my hand over my mouth.
I did not mean to suggest that, I mumbled through my fingers.
It is normal for you to crave blood, he reminded me without looking up from the small case. Hey, you may be used to sucking the life fluid out of somebody's veins, but I'm still a little squeamish about this whole draining thing, okay? I counted. He turned to me with a few pads and a brush in his hand.
Hold still.
I frowned and opened my mouth, but got a dabble full of powder from the brush. I choked and stumbled back against a wall. I warned you, he added. I clutched at my tingling throat and glared at him.
You sure you know what you're doing here?
Tim would never learn to apply makeup, so I did, Vincent told me. My mouth dropped so far it hit the subway tracks beneath the street. You learned how to apply makeup? I choked out. Vincent frowned. It was necessary to ensure Tim survived many of his investigations. I doubled over from laughter and clutched at my sides. You know how to apply makeup? I wheezed. You had better hope so. Your survival depends on it, he pointed out. That knocked the amusement right out of me, and I glared at him.
You just had to remind me, I groaned.
You lose focus, he pointed out. I shrugged. A girl's gotta have ways to mentally survive these insane situations. Standing still would work better for surviving, he advised. I stepped up to him and straightened myself.
All right, but not too much of that gunk.
I don't want to end up looking like the Bride of Frankenstein, I replied.
Close your eyes, he ordered.
I did as he said and giggled when the brush glided softly across my cheeks.
Hold still, he commanded.
I can't help it. That tickles, I shot back.
Don't speak.
You're enjoying giving these orders, aren't you?
Stop talking.
I sighed, shut my trap, and tried not to twitch and squirm. In a few minutes, he pulled the brush away. Open your eyes. My eyes fluttered open, and I was presented with a mirror from the makeup kit that was held up by Vince. I was in awe at the touch of red blush on my cheeks, my finely brushed eyelashes, and the hint of powder over my few imperfections in an otherwise flawless face.
Wow, I breathed.
Then you approve, he wondered. Like most artists, he wanted approval of his work. I'd be an idiot if I didn't. How long did you do this for, Tim?
A century, he replied as he put away his tools. That's plenty of time for practice, but you really did do a good job, I complimented.
He didn't turn to look at me, but I detected a hint of a smile at the corner of his lips.
So, am I ready to go out there?
I asked him. Provided you not say anything stupid, he replied. I rolled my eyes, but felt so giddy at my wonderful pampering that I didn't care about the insult.
Good, so what now? Now we get you inside.
Vincent pulled out the notebook and removed one of the clipped photos which he handed to me. I found myself staring at a balding man of 50 with a goofy smile but hard eyes. He wore a suit that tried to slim his not slim figure, but ended up showing off his potbelly. This is Mr. George Boyd, a member of the cult who frequents the restaurant, Vincent told me. We'll put you at his table, and the rest is up to you to find where the cult meets and when, and to get inside with the member to find the boy. The color drained from my face, but I shakily smiled.
Is that all?
I should have him eating out of my hand in a few minutes. Vincent stepped up beside me and offered his arm. I wondered if this was some sort of trick. I will help you inside, he promised. I snorted and took his arm.
At least you're doing something, I teased. I won't be far from you.
Our telepathic link will allow you to keep me informed about your progress, he reminded me.
Yeah, about that.
I don't really know how to talk to you through that link, I pointed out. Focus your thoughts on me and speak in your mind, he instructed. I decided to give his advice a try, and focused my thoughts on the handsome vampire at my side. The one word I wanted to broadcast was a good loud damn. I knew my message was received when Vince winced and frowned. Your volume is too high, he told me. I shrugged and smiled evilly.
Just wanted to make sure my message got through.
Clearly. Hey, I was just trying to get you used to that high volume. If things don't go so well in there, you'll be hearing a lot more at that level, I warned him. Vincent ignored me, and led me up to the end of the line and right past it.
You're not thinking of taking cuts, are you?
I wondered.
Yes. That's not nice.
I know.
And how are you going to get us in?
A smirk slipped onto his lips.
You'll see.
I was both fearful and intrigued. Vincent guided us up to the door where stood 2 bouncers and a man with a clipboard. The bouncers opened the door for those with their names on the list. Those not on the list were allowed inside as space allowed, and most of the time space didn't allow anybody else. One of the bouncers put up his large hand and stopped us from entering.
Where did Tar think you're going? He asked us.
Inside, Vincent coolly replied. The bouncer looked to Clipboard Man, who glanced down at us from his long thin nose. Names please, he drawled out in a nasally voice.
Vincent, he replied.
Clipboard Man raised an eyebrow. First or last? Only, Vince answered. Clipboard Man frowned but checked his list. I don't see anybody with the only name of Vincent anywhere on my list, so I'll have to ask you to leave. I watched Vincent for his reaction, and he lowered the angle of his face so his glasses slid down to reveal his dark eyes. They caught the eyes of Clipboard Man, who started back as though he'd been struck.
I'm sure my name is on there.
Why don't you check again? Vincent suggested. The man mechanically bowed his head and glanced down at his list for only a second before he slowly nodded.
Yes, I see it here now, he announced.
His voice was flat, like somebody had sucked all the emotion out of it. I am sorry for the delay, please step inside. He stepped aside and gestured for the bouncers to open the doors. The pair looked at each other, shrugged, and opened the doors. Vincent raised his head and his glasses slid back into place. With a wicked grin on his face, he led me inside. In stark contrast to the bustling exterior, the interior was quiet and peaceful. Round tables sat on the center floor before a small stage, while there were booths with comfortable cushioned benches along the walls. Everyone was dressed in elegant attire, and even the penguin-suited waiters made me feel like a country bumpkin. My first reaction to all this fineness was to turn tail and run, but Vincent put his free hand over my arm. "Easy," he whispered. I frowned.
"That's easy for you to say."
"You can mesmerize them into ignoring you," I quietly hissed.
"There's nothing wrong with your attire, nor your face," he assured me.
I blushed. That was probably the nicest thing he'd ever said to me. Hell, it's one of the few nice things he'd said to me, period. "You sure you're the same cranky vampire I'm stuck to for all eternity?" I asked him. "Waiter," Vincent called out to a young man passing us. I pouted at his lack of answer, but he ignored me. "We're looking for Mr. George Boyd's table. Could you direct us?" The young man turned and pointed to a booth along the wall close to the stage. It had a great view of both the stage and the rest of the restaurant, and thankfully it was also empty.
"That's his table."
Vincent bowed and guided me over to a seat on the cushioned circular bench. He remained standing close beside me. I pulled at my dress and looked nervously at the other patrons.
"I hope he comes quick before they smell my cheap shampoo," I muttered.
A horrible thought floated into my mind. Vince, what if Boyd doesn't come tonight?" "His summary says he comes here most every night looking for company," Vincent replied. "So, I'm supposed to woo this bachelor into getting into the cult?" I guessed. "Precisely."
"That sounds kind of mean," I brought up.
"Console your human emotions with the thought that you are perhaps saving a life."
"I'm starting to think this boy isn't worth it, or the money," I muttered.
Chapter 11. My whining was interrupted by the arrival of our target. Mr. George Boyd himself entered the restaurant, and I noticed Vincent slip away from the table. I understood he didn't want Boyd to see me with another man, but I desperately wanted to reach out and grasp Vincent's hand to keep him rooted beside me. Instead, I had to make do with a napkin off the table which I mercilessly twisted beneath the tablecloth. Boyd walked over to his usual table, but paused a yard in front of it when he spotted me. "Can I help you?" he asked me. I plastered a smile on my face that was sickly sweet, and barely hid the rest of my trembling face. "Oh, maybe. I was just, looking for a good time." I jumped at the familiar voice in my head. Boyd looked at me like he worried I was having a seizure. "Are you all right?" he wondered. My smile, if possible, grew bigger. "Me? I'm just fine. I just thought I could, find a good time and this table looked like a good spot." Boyd raised an eyebrow, but the corners of his lips twitched upward.
"Well, you've certainly come to a good place."
"This is my usual table." "Oh. I didn't know," I replied. "You're a terrible liar," Vincent commented. "And you're an ass," I shot back. Boyd slipped into the seat beside me, and looked me over with eyes that were hungry for more than the house steak.
"I'm not sure I've seen you in here before."
"Is this your first time?"
"Yeah, my first time for a lot of things tonight," I told him.
"Seeing as how we're table mates, how about I make this my treat? You can order anything you want on the menu, and I'll order it," he offered.
"That'd be great.
Especially since I didn't have any money on me."
"I'll just have what you're having."
"Steer the conversation back to the chance at a good time," Vincent advised. "Right now, you are the most annoying voice in my head," I snapped. Outside my mind, I slid closer to Boyd and leaned a little on his arm.
"So about that good time?"
"I hope it's got something more than a drink involved."
"And mashed potatoes," he joked.
I was looking for something a little harder and more exciting, I cooed. "Don't become too intimate with him," Vincent warned. I smirked. "Jealous?" I teased. "He's to lead us to the cult, not his bedroom." Maybe they're the same spot I counted. Miss. I snapped out of my inner conversation and sheepishly smiled.
Sorry, just kind of dozed off there.
What were you saying? I was saying I know a lot of places to have a good time, but were you looking for private or public? He asked me. Private, but not too private, I replied. Like a club or something. I'm trying to find a place where I can talk to people about my strange interests. Boyd raised an eyebrow. Strange interests? I shrugged and tried not to rip my napkin in two.
I don't really know how to explain this.
You're interested in the practical applications of ancient rites and rituals.
But I'm kind of interested in the practical applications of ancient rites and rituals, I finished.
A wide grin slipped onto his face. Really? I happen to be a student of such things. What do you think of the daily exercising of spirits, with daily aerobics? It's a trick question. There is no such thing, Vincent told me. It's great, except, I think getting drunk during exercises might hurt your muscles, I teased. Boyd leaned back in his seat and chuckled. His pot belly jiggled.
So you don't think much of it?
I think what you just said is a bunch of hogwash, I replied.
Well, you're right.
I was just testing to see if you had a basic knowledge of rituals, or was pulling my leg. And did I pass with flying colors? I asked him. Almost as beautifully as yourself, he answered. He slid closer to me and I smelled his breath. It smelled like he'd just come from a brimstone ritual, complete with rotten egg scent. His voice dropped to a sultry whisper. Of course, what you're asking to see isn't all good times. We have a serious membership. I repeated.
The cult I belong to.
We worship a very old god, one far older than any these pathetic established religions preach about, he told me.
Sounds interesting.
Any chance I can get a seat for the next sacrifice? I joked. He chuckled, and I stiffened when I felt his hand settle on my leg. I had to hold back my natural reaction to beat the man out of his suit.
Well, we do get to bring a guest to the general meetings, and there's one tomorrow night if you're available. Now that sounds like a good time.
One I wouldn't miss for the world, I cooed. Good. Until then, how about you and I get to know each other a little better, he suggested. I'd rather play in traffic, I thought. Focus, Vincent advised. I am focusing. I'm focusing on not trying to kill this lecherous leech, I replied. I turned my full attention back to Boyd.
That sounds great.
Let's start with food, I'm starving. I wasn't really hungry for anything, because of my appetite for only blood or Vincent's life force, and was a little nervous when he ordered our meals. I hadn't eaten any food since before I got the ring stuck on my finger. Any ideas how food will affect me? I asked the annoying voice in my head. It won't. Won't what? It won't affect you. So no puking all this stuff up? No. So where's the stuff going to go? Right through me? It will be absorbed by your body, but won't provide you with any nutrients. So like eating a school lunch? I wouldn't know. You lucky dog.
You know, I haven't learned your name, Boyd mused.
His curious hand slid up a little farther on my leg, and I had to repress a shudder. I'm Elmira Banks, I lied. A very good name, he complimented. There was an awkward pause between us.
Aren't you going to ask mine? He wondered.
I jerked away from him. I'd forgotten I wasn't supposed to know him. Oh right. What's your name? George Boyd. I'm a philanthropist by profession, but that's just to get the tax breaks. He thought the joke was so funny that he leaned back and burst out laughing. I was just glad his hand detached from me. He got control of himself, reattached his hand to me like a parasite, and looked me over with that same wild glint in his eye.
So, what do you do for a living?
Oh, just this and that. Whatever buys these overpriced. Lovely, Vincent scolded me. These lovely dresses, I corrected myself. Anything? Boyd asked me. That was not a question I wanted an old bachelor to be asking me.
Short of selling myself on a street corner, I added for clarity.
His face drooped, but his hand and dirty mind weren't about to give up the hope of an exciting night filled with candles and Viagra. So you're a companion for the rich? He boldly wondered. Among others, I replied. Like the living impaired. Undead, Vincent argued. Unbelievably thin-skinned undead, I shot back. I see. I think, Boyd commented. Anyway, what do you say to finishing our meal here and heading back to my bus stop? If I don't get home in a few hours, my roommate will worry sick about me, I told him. And not be able to save me from trouble, because the sun will be up at that hour. That struck the final blow to Boyd's hopes of getting some of my nice ass. I see. I can drive you home if you like, he gallantly offered.
Oh no, that's fine.
I like to ride the bus. No one likes to ride the bus, Vincent spoke up. Aren't you decomposing yet? I shot back. A sly grin slipped onto Boyd's face.
I think I know your game, he told me.
The bottom of my stomach dropped to the floor. Why, you do? I stuttered. He scooted closer to me, and I felt his hot breath on my cheeks. I couldn't hide the shudder of disgust, but he took it as a compliment because his grin got wider. You like to keep an allure of mystery around you, don't you? I exhaled through my nose. My secret was safe.
Yeah, that's right.
That's me. The mystery woman with a mystery past. Then you'll be the perfect addition to our little club. I'm sure even Leader Sins will be happy to see you.
Leader Sins?
I repeated to keep up my dumb ploy. I just wished I was acting my lines more than bumbling through them. He's the leader of our small group. All new initiates have to speak with him before being admitted, but I'm sure you won't have any trouble with him. I nervously laughed and tore the napkin in two.
I'm sure I won't, I replied through ground teeth.
Ah, here comes our dinner. Ask him the location of the cult center, Vincent advised. Don't you think he'd be smart enough not to tell me that? I pointed out. Our plates were set before us, and Boyd had trouble cutting into his steak. He just couldn't get the hang of using a knife and fork at the same time. Never mind.
Boyd, darling, I spoke up.
He looked up from his plate, with a large piece of parsley hanging out of his mouth.
Yes, dearest, the parsley, Boyd asked me.
I was wondering where your little group meets. Some sort of hidden tower in the middle of the city, or a creepy mansion out in the country. I guessed. He smiled and shook his head. I can't answer that, not until you've been okayed through Leader Sins. Sorry. I shrugged. That's fine. I trust you. The rest of that long evening was spent on Boyd's favorite subject, himself. He talked endlessly about his wealth, his stocks, his wealth, his cars, his wealth, his wine cellar, and did I mention his wealth? It was enough to drive a normal girl insane, and sane again with boredom. Finally the clock struck a late hour, and this Cinderella had to get out of there. I think I have to leave, I interrupted another long dissertation on the benefits of being him. Oh. Is it that late already? He checked his expensive watch and frowned. We have a few hours until the buses stop running. But my roommate's waiting for me and she's my mom, and she's really cranky if I'm noisy around the apartment, I told him.
Your mom? Boyd wondered.
Your mom? Vincent growled. Yeah, and she's very particular about when I get home. Always before sunrise and don't disturb the apartment pets, I added, thinking of the cockroaches in the wall. I grabbed my purse and stood, and Boyd followed. She'll be angry if I don't leave right now and get home. If that is what must happen, then where do you want to meet tomorrow? He asked me. How about in front of this restaurant? It's where we first met and all, I cooed, nearly gagging on my own puke. That's fine. The meeting starts at 6, so we should start from here at 5:30, he told me.
Perfect.
I'll be here. I tried to flee, but Boyd caught my arm. If you have to leave, then at least let me drop you off at the nearest bus station. It's a good 4 blocks down, he offered. I smiled, shook my head, and shook my arm from his grasp.
No, that's fine.
I'll just grab a ride on the back of a car, but thanks. I dashed out of there like a prisoner set free from solitary confinement, after 20 years for shoplifting a pencil. The night air was loud, crowded, and stank, and was a hell of a lot better than being with him. I'd hardly scurried down the block, before I felt a shadow fall on me from behind. An arm wrapped around my waist, and pulled me into a nearby alley. I didn't need to be telepathically linked to my attacker, to know it was Vincent being pushy. I pulled away, swung around and glared at the vampire. Do you mind?
No. Well, I kind of do.
I straightened the creases in my dress, and made sure my necklace was still around my neck and not him. Besides, what's the big deal dragging me in here? Can't you just be a good GPS system, and tell me to take a left into the next creepy, dirty alley? I prefer guaranteed results, which we have very little of this night, he scolded. I folded my arms and narrowed my eyes. I'm pretty sure getting into the cult club tomorrow night is pretty good results. But you have no idea where the club is being held, he pointed out. And you didn't help me ask that question, I added. You were in my mind all night like a bad hangover, so you had every chance to tell me to ask him. Vincent opened his mouth, paused, then closed it with a sharp click of his pointed teeth. A triumphant smile slipped onto my lips.
So let's just say we got some pretty good results and go home, so I can take off this makeup.
You did a great job putting it on, but I'm starting to feel like my face is running. I strode past him and paused in the street down which I'd been walking.
Aren't you coming? Yes, but not that way, he replied.
Why?
The car is parked the other way.
Oh. Right. I knew that. Chapter 12. By the time we got back to the apartment, I was exhausted, and Vincent looked like he had one more foot in the grave than usual. I plopped down on the couch and removed my shoes, which I plopped on the coffee table. Vincent grimaced and brushed them off.
They're not radioactive, I assured him.
I will have to take your word for it, he replied. He opened the lid of his coffin and slipped inside. I raised an eyebrow. Going to bed, already? Shouldn't we plan our strategy for tomorrow night? He stepped into the coffin, took off his glasses and shrugged. You will infiltrate the group and find out where the boy is staying. We find him and return him to his mother. I rolled my eyes. You make it sound so easy that I don't know what could possibly go wrong, I quipped.
Yes, it's the perfect plan provided my puppet performs perfectly, he snarked.
I opened my mouth, but he lay down and shut the lid before I could tell him what I thought of him, so instead I rapped my fist on the top of the lid and shouted it through the wood. I hate you, I yelled. Duly noted, now leave me alone, he replied. I glared at the wood hoping it would burst into flames, but half-vampire people apparently didn't have that ability. However, now that Count Dracula was catching up on his much-needed beauty sleep, I could catch up on mine. That is, after I got these uncomfortable clothes and makeup off. There really weren't any mirrors in the apartment, except in the handheld one in the makeup kit, and probably the bathroom I couldn't get into because the door was shut tight. It would take someone with super strength to get that thing. Wait a second. I had super strength now. There was only one obstacle to overcome, and right then it lay in bed in front of me. I jumped up from my spot on the couch, and lightly knocked my feet against the side of the coffin. Nobody answered my knock. I lowered my voice to a faint whisper. Vince, you in there? I knew calling him by that name would at least elicit a growl. I didn't get so much as a grumble.
I'm going to open the bathroom.
Is that all right? No answer. With my imaginary permission slip in hand, I tiptoed over to the bathroom door and tried the old handle. It jiggled, but that's only because its screws needed tightening. The door didn't open. It was still locked. I glanced over my shoulder at the closed box but heard nothing. "Vince," I whispered. No reply. "Vincent, I'm going to open the bathroom, you sure it's okay?" Again there was silence. If Vincent didn't have any further objections to stopping me, then I might as well go for it. I took the handle firmly in hand, and gave it a good wrenching. I ended up with the broken doorknob in hand, and the door still shut. There was now a hole where the knob had sat, and I grabbed that and pulled the door open. The heavy metal bolt that locked the door, and had been attached to the broken knob, clattered noisily to the floor. I froze, and I whipped my head over to the coffin. Still nothing. That guy slept like the dead. Now the door was open to me, and I peeked inside. I imagined a room full of cobwebs, spiders, rats dead and alive, and a toilet that made public restrooms look like a royal palace. Expecting all that, I was pretty surprised to find the place was dusty but otherwise clean. There was a sink atop a small cupboard, with a toilet and bathtub beyond them. Over the sink connected to the wall was a small medicine cabinet, and I noticed there were faint fingerprints on the edge, showing somebody opened it within the last century. I strode over and cautiously opened it, fearful it hid the same delightful surprise as the book's ribbon peddled. I found only empty, dusty shelves except for the center one, and that held only a small glass vial of something. I couldn't see through a faint mist that fogged up the interior of the glass. I reached out for the container with shaking fingers, and the moment I touched the glass, I felt a jolt of emotion run through me that sent me tottering back into the wall behind me. At the same moment, there was a scream from the living room. It was full of agony and despair, and sounded like it came from Vincent's box. I darted out of the bathroom in time to see the lid tossed off, and Vincent shakily raise himself to a seated position. He hung over the edge of the coffin like a man weakened by hunger and drink, and his eyes were wide and wild. Vincent noticed me come out of the room, and those terrifying eyes turned to anger.
"What were you doing in there?" he yelled at me. "Just cleaning up, but what the hell happened?"
"I thought I heard you scream," I replied. Rather than answering, Vincent tried to stand, but his legs collapsed beneath him. I rushed over, and caught him beneath his arms before he made a hard landing back into his box. I lowered him back into the bed. "Easy there. I don't think your legs agree with what the rest of you wants to do." He growled and pushed me away.
"What the hell did you do?"
he growled. I shook my head. "I didn't do anything but open the bathroom and touch some violin." Vincent's hand shot out and he grasped me by the throat. He pulled me close to him, so our noses almost brushed against each other. My fingers wrapped around his hand to free myself, but I didn't have as much superhuman strength as he. "Did you break the seal?" he asked me. I shook my head. "All I did was touch it," I choked out. Relief passed over his face and he let me go. I rubbed my neck and glared at him. "Mind telling me what that strangling was for? You act like I touched your favorite teddy bear without asking." He sighed, looked away, and grumbled an answer that I couldn't hear. "Come again?" I asked him.
"That was my—"
The final word trailed off. "A little louder," I loudly requested. He growled and whipped his head toward me.
"That was my soul."
I blinked at him for a long moment, and a smile crept onto my lips. "Seriously?
That's the best lie you can come up with?"
He stared unblinking and unflinchingly at me, with his lips tightly pursed together. My humor died like my previous life.
"You're not joking, are you?"
"No."
"Then that misty stuff in the bottle is your soul?"
"Yes." I climbed onto the couch and tilted my head. "I've heard of spirits in a bottle, but this is a little ridiculous. If you don't mind my asking, why is your soul in a bottle?"
"I do mind."
He grimaced, and lifted himself out of his coffin. I stood and grabbed his arm before he played Humpty Dumpty and had a great fall. "Easy there, Mr. Secrets. You're not exactly feeling well after me getting all intimate with your soul, I teased him. I expected at least a glare from him, but all I got was a tired wince.
Set me down on the couch, he ordered.
I did as he asked and sat myself down on the arm next to him.
You know, it's not healthy keeping secrets from your partner, I scolded him.
He closed his eyes and pursed his lips. My soul is in a bottle to survive my immortality. I blinked. Come again. He opened his eyes and glared at me in annoyance. I am a very old creature. My human emotions are unable to handle the full weight of these long years, so I separated my soul from my physical being and placed it in that container. I tilted my head to the other side.
You can do that?
With alchemy magic, yes. So you really are a soulless bastard.
On the first count, yes.
An evil thought slipped into my mind, and an equally evil grin slipped onto my lips.
So can I go touch it again?
I would rather you not, he replied.
Why not?
What did my touching it do to you? It reconnected me with my emotions. I furrowed my brow and scratched my head.
I don't follow.
Vincent rolled his eyes and grabbed my left hand. He held up the finger with the ring. This connects us on a basic, spiritual level. That is how we're able to communicate via telepathy, and why it's dangerous for you to touch the vial with my soul inside. I pulled my hand from his grasp and thought about what he said. So because this ring connects us, and I connected my finger to the vial, that means you were connect to your soul? Precisely.
So can I go touch it again?
Are you even listening to me? Maybe.
Then do not touch the vial. Not even a little bit.
What if I rubbed it? Would that make you ticklish? No. I frowned and crossed my arms. Maybe you'd be less of a grump if you had more emotion in you, I commented. I am not willing to try that experiment, he refused. I raised an eyebrow.
Why not?
What would happen if your soul got sucked into your body? I'm not sure, and I'm not willing to find out. He stood from the couch and slid into his coffee-stained coffin.
And I'll have to ask that you not touch the vial again.
You didn't exactly tell me what it did to you. If you don't tell me, I might get curious and try it again, I warned him. He sighed and pinched the bridge of his thin nose. His voice was strained, almost sad, and definitely full of regret. I felt an overwhelming surge of emotion that brought up far too many memories connected to those emotions. Satisfied? I nodded, and he lay down and closed the lid of his bed. I waited a few minutes before I slipped into the bathroom. The vial still sat on its shelf, and I stared into the misty contents. The thick white air inside slowly floated around in its confines, and I wondered if it would drive Vincent mad for it to be let free. Like him, I wasn't willing to try, especially since I'd be attached to him when he went nuts, so I closed the mirror door and went about my face cleaning, all the time wondering about what-ifs. Chapter 13. When I came out of the bathroom, the sun shone brightly through the windows, and I opted for a light nap in the bedroom. That stretched into most of the day, and at sunset I was rudely bounced up and down on the old mattress. I frowned, buried my head deeper into the pillow and battered away the hands.
Just 5 more hours, I grumbled.
It's 4:30. Your meeting with Boyd is in less than an hour, Vincent announced. I pulled my head out from beneath my pillow and glared at him. Even though we're now officially partners, I still officially hate you. He grinned. I wouldn't tolerate any other treatment. I sat up and ran my hand through my wild hair.
Good, now get me something pretty to wear and put on my mask, I mumbled.
Vincent frowned. I am your partner, not your stylist. I shrugged, and a wicked glint slipped into my eyes.
All right, I'll just dress and make up myself.
Vincent pursed his lips and sighed. Find the dress and I will attend to the makeup, he offered. With our powers combined, I was dressed and masked in half an hour, and Vincent drove us to the restaurant. We reached the meeting spot with 10 minutes to spare, but I saw that Boyd already stood outside the entrance. I sighed and steadied myself. There won't be any danger today, Vincent told me. I whipped my head to the vampire at my side and raised an eyebrow.
You sure about that?
What if I'm set up as a sacrifice? He shook his head. Highly unlikely. Cults are particular about who and what they sacrifice.
So they might wait until the second date?
I quipped.
Possibly. You're just full of hope and cheer, you know that?
I wondered. Vincent nodded at Boyd. Go to him, and I'll follow in the car. I frowned and hopped out. Just don't go at your usual speed or you'll pass by us enough times for him to notice you, I warned him. He frowned but didn't reply. I shut the car door and strolled over to my date with a big fake smile plastered to my sweet. Good evening, darling, I greeted him. He heard me, and his face lit up when he spotted me in the crowd. Myra. Good evening to you. Thank God he said my alias because I'd forgotten what I'd given him. Myra Banks, Vincent told me. Thanks, I sincerely replied. One of us was paying attention to my prattle, and I was surprised it was him. Boyd walked up to me and wrapped one of his heavy arms around my thin shoulders. We're going to have a wonderful time. I've told Sins you're coming, and he can't wait to meet you. My smile widened to the point of cracking.
That's great.
I can't wait to meet him and all the other, cultists. Great. Let's get a taxi. The meeting starts in 20 minutes. Boyd hailed a taxi, and we slipped into the back seat. I nervously glanced over my shoulder, and was relieved when Vincent pulled onto the street behind us. The address Boyd gave the taxi was for the downtown business district. We drove past dimly lit skyscrapers and mostly empty parking garages. The cars in the streets and the people on the sidewalks thinned. Nobody wanted to be around a place of work at night. The taxi stopped in front of one of the shorter and more silvery buildings. The dark, empty windows glared down at us as we exited the vehicle, and it drove off. Vincent drove by, but he didn't even slow down, and last I saw of him, he turned the corner at the end of the block. You'd better not leave me, I warned him. Wouldn't think of it, he replied.
Doesn't look like much, does it?
Boyd commented. I tilted my head back for a view of the 10-floor skyscraper. It was a wide, squat, rectangular building made of steel. At the base and through 4 glass doors I glimpsed a lobby, and at the back were some elevators. One of the elevators stood to the far left, closer to the wall of the building than its brethren. To the right in the lobby sat the desk, and a guard sat behind it with his feet on top of the desk.
It certainly doesn't scream cult, I mused.
Boyd laughed.
No, but what until you get to the top floor?
He wrapped his arm around my waist and pulled me inside. At our entrance, the guard looked up from the comic he'd been reading. He tipped his hat at Boyd, who nodded in return. I'm a regular here, he explained with pride. A regular ham, I thought to myself. I expected a reply from Vincent, and my heart rate increased when nothing came. You still there? Again, there was nothing but silence in my head. Even my warning voices had fled. I was on my own. Boyd led me to the elevators, the one that stood off from the others, and clicked the button. The light above the doors ticked down, and dinged before they opened to reveal the inside of the elevator. At the helm of the buttons was what I could only describe as a woman in need of a chiropractor. Starting at her waist, her spine curved forward, and forced her entire upper half to bend a half-foot beyond the end of her toes. Her hands were clawed talons that she hung in front of her, and her eyebrows were bushy enough to need a weed whacker to tame them. She snarled at us and showed off a fine set of dentures that had more decay than Detroit. The hunchbacked Neanderthal was hunched over the buttons in such a fashion that I suspected any attempt to press them myself would have meant losing a finger or two. Her eyes were narrowed, and they darted between us and her precious as the buttons. Boyd pulled me into the elevator and the doors shut.
Top floor, he ordered her.
She pressed the button and up we went. Boyd nudged me in the side and nodded at the woman.
I bet you don't see something like that every day.
My eyes darted between his blunt comment and the hunchback. Like what? The elevator buttons? I guessed. He laughed and shook his head.
She's deaf, so we're fine.
Master Sins picked her up in some remote city in Eastern Europe, and she's the only one allowed to man the elevator. I slapped a fake grin on my face and chuckled.
What kind thing for him to do.
Boyd nodded his head.
Yes, Master Sins takes care of his own.
We're like his children. He leaned down and winked. I guess you could say the spouses are committing incest. He belted out a guffaw that echoed in the small space, and the vibrations caught the attention of our operator. She turned and sneered at us. I cringed backwards and waved. This was the elevator ride from hell, with a detour upstairs before the final trip down. The trip was blessedly short, and in a minute I felt the contraption stop and the doors swung open. They revealed a long corridor drenched in black paint with tiles speckled with silver glitter. On either side of the hall were thick wooden doors with arcane symbols on them. The end of the hall lay in the far distance, and was another dark door. Here's our stop, Boyd announced. He led me onto the floor, and the elevator doors nearly shut on my rear. We strode forward, and our heels clacked on the linoleum floor.
What do you think of the decor?
Quite mystical, isn't it? I guess the silver in the floor really is silver. Yeah, mystical, I agreed. It creeped the hell out of me, and actually made me long for Vincent to interrupt the silence in my head with a snarky comment. Boyd waved his hand at the walls and the doors. The black paint is meant to convey the demon world, and the doors are inscribed with symbols to represent portals to the darkness, he explained.
So what's really in them?
I asked him. He shrugged.
I don't really know.
Master Sins is probably the only one who's been inside them.
Lucky him,
I commented. Isn't he? Boyd agreed, wholly unaware of the sarcasm in my voice. We strode past the black doors and to the end of the hallway. There was a small impressed square in the center, and when our clacking heels stopped before the portal it slid to the side. A pair of bright white eyes glared back at us.
What's the password?
Boyd chuckled.
It's me, Fred Boyd, and my guest, he replied. What's the password?
Fred insisted. Boyd sighed and he muttered the password, asteroid. The small square slid closed, and in another moment the door was flung open. Fred revealed himself as a giant of a man, who needed to stoop to see through the square peephole. His shoulders were nearly as broad as I was tall, and thin wisps of unruly black hair hardly covered the top of his head. He stepped off to the side and sneered at us. The help in this building were such wonderful people. Chapter 14. Boyd guided me inside the large square room. The area was darkly lit by torches that hung from the walls. They cast shadows over the 24 occupants, half of whom were clothed in crimson and black robes. The other half were dressed as casually as Boyd and I looked for my target, but Eric Hargrove was nowhere in sight. The people congregated around columns that were evenly spaced at intervals, on either side of a long rug-draped walkway. The tops of the columns were carved into curved arches that ended in horrible faces, with their tongues stuck out at the people. At the back of the room was a short stage, and at the rear of the stage was a tall wooden chair with thick arms and a wide seat that even Fred would find comfortable. There was nowhere for anyone else to sit, but Boyd led me over to a group of 4 people, 2 dressed in robes, and the other 2 as we were attired. The 2 in robes also wore hoods over their faces that covered everything but the tips of their chins. He smiled at the others, but none smiled back. "Good evening, fellow occultists," he greeted them. "Do you always have to be so chipper?" one of the robed people, a man, commented. I named him Chin. Boyd shrugged.
"Sorry, just nature, I guess. This is a sacred place."
"Don't destroy it," the other robed figure, a woman, commented. I named her Chinette. One of the non-robed people, a woman, rolled her eyes. "Don't you two ever get tired of being so dramatic?" It's bad enough Master Sin's coming in as he does. I named her sane, because that was the sanest comment I'd heard that entire evening. Chinette turned to her and glared.
At least I think she glared.
You mustn't speak of Master Sins with so much disrespect. We owe him so much for offering to teach us the mystical ways. Boyd held up his hand toward the woman. We all know what Master Sins has done for us, and I'm sure she meant it as a tease. Sane snorted. Maybe some of us don't go kissing his ass whenever he makes his appearance. As though she called the devil, the flames of the torches lowered and half the light vanished from the room. The idle chatter stopped, and everyone turned to the chair. My eyes widened when I noticed a dark circle appear in the floor. It was of the color of fathomless black, and the edges twisted like tentacles. Something broke from the darkness, and I realized it was the head of a man about Vincent's apparent age. He had long black hair tied back in a low tail, and his skin was well tanned. His body rose from the darkness like there was an elevator beneath him, and when his feet appeared, the darkness sucked into itself and receded into his dark shoes. He wore a crimson suit with a white tie on which were stitched several symbols like those on the door. That was one hell of a mirror trick. The man's eyes were closed, but he opened them slowly and revealed eyes that matched his clothes. He stepped forward to the edge of the short platform and bowed to the audience. They all bowed in return, and I clumsily followed suit. Greetings, my children. I hope I find you well, he called to them. His voice resonated around the room, and seemed to come from everywhere at once.
Yes, Master Sins, the audience replied.
This was the notorious Master Sins, purveyor of damnation and suspected murderer. His red eyes flickered over the audience, and fell on an older man in a plain grey suit. Percy, I see you didn't join in the Union of Health. Is something the matter? All eyes turned to Percy, who shrank beneath the attention. He rubbed his left leg and winced.
It's just a matter of my leg.
It's never been right since the war, and it's been bothering me a lot lately. Master Sin stepped off the stage and walked over to the old man. He laid a hand on Percy's shoulder and smiled at his disciple. Let you be no longer in pain. My mouth dropped open as I beheld a small tendril flit from Sin's hand and into the man's shoulder. It dove past the cloth and presumably burrowed itself into his body. Nobody else panicked over the slimy thing invading the guy's body, so I assumed they hadn't seen it, or this was a common occurrence. Whatever it was, I suspected he borrowed the ability from his godmaster, Astaroth. Percy perked up immediately, and a smile brightened his face. The pain's gone. You got rid of it. Sin smiled. Be at peace and know that the great god Astaroth watches over you. All hail Astaroth! Percy shouted. All hail Astaroth, the crowd chanted. All hail Aspirin, I muttered. I must have spoken too loud because Sins turned his eyes on me. He left the jubilant Percy and parted the audience to arrive at our small group. The believers bowed to him, and I gave a weak wave. Who do we have here? He wondered. This is Myra Banks, Master, my guest for the evening, Boyd introduced me. Sins stretched out his hand to catch my chin, but I jerked backwards away from his touch. I didn't want some tentacle monster seducing me. He raised an eyebrow, and the smile on his lips nearly faltered. You seem to have a unique aura around you, Miss Banks. I have rarely felt anything quite like it. I shrugged.
Must have been the garlic I had earlier.
That stuff puts out scent like steam off a hot rock. He chuckled. Perhaps garlic isn't to your liking, but I am glad you are here. This will make the evening much more interesting. Sins turned away without elaborating, and walked back to his stage. He held his hands over his head, and his voice echoed around the room. Come closer, for I bring good tidings. The crowd moved forward and pressed against the front of the stage. It was like a rock concert, but without the music and fun, but with an emphasis on the drugs. Last we met, I announced the great sacrifice where one of you would join Astaroth in his dark domain. I have found such a person from among you. Whisperings swept through the crowd, and Sins held up his hand. The crowd silenced. The tension was palpable. Let all present here know that we have found a suitable subject for Astaroth. He has come to us of his own free will, like a lamb to the slaughter, and there will be blood this night. Oh. Sins lowered one arm and gestured to a door beside the low stage. It swung open on its own, and in the doorway stood my target, Eric Hargrove. He stepped into the room and joined Sins on the stage. The ignorant young man gave a meek wave to the audience, but none waved back. Sins wrapped an arm around Eric's shoulders and pressed him against his side. You who are about to go to Astaroth are a lucky few. He needs companionship only once a decade, and you, among all the others, have been chosen to go to him. I am ready, Eric replied. Sins smiled and turned to the crowd. He has accepted the position as companion to Astaroth. Bring forth the table. The crowd parted to reveal the rug-covered walkway, and up the walkway came Fred. He carried an ornate wooden table carved with demon heads and skulls. The ogre plopped the table in front of the stage, and disappeared to the front of the room. Sins led Eric off the stage and to the table, where he helped the young man onto the top. You will be eternally with Astaroth, and shall be blessed forever. My mouth was agape, as what appeared to be a ritual sacrifice took place before my eyes. I glanced around the crowd and all present were eager. Some even looked jealously on Eric. I was the only sane person in a madhouse. Sins moved to the opposite side of the table from the crowd, and from his waist he pulled out a long sharp knife. Its sharp edge glistened in the light of the torches, and his red eyes were illuminated by the dim light. A twisted smile slipped onto his lips, as he raised his hands above his head. All hail Astaroth! All hail Astaroth, the crowd chanted. Eric joined in the chorus. Sins looked down at Eric, and glided one hand across the young man's cheek. You will be one with him, now and forever. I'm ready, Eric insisted. Then we will welcome you into his arms. Sins grasped the hilt of the knife in both his hands, and raised the weapon over his head and above Eric. Stop! I yelled. I jumped forward and crashed into the table. It slid along the rug and into Sins' gut. You can't do this. A hand grabbed my upper arm and pulled me from the table. I turned my head to find myself staring into the red face of Boyd. What the hell are you doing? He hissed. Trying to save his life. I snapped back. Save his life? You think we're really going to kill him? The sacrifice isn't real, Boyd argued. A chuckle interrupted our little discussion, and all eyes turned to Sins. He moved to the same side of the table as me, and put a heavy hand on my shoulder. I am afraid we did not explain to our guest that such a ritual involves no sacrifice. My eyes drifted to my shoulder, and they widened when I beheld the tendrils slither from his hand, and onto my shirt. I tore my shoulder from his grasp and stumbled backward, so my back was to the crowd and I faced the table. The menacing worshippers closed in on me, with their hands outstretched. Unbeliever, someone shouted. I had no escape, no plan, no hope. Their hands grabbed my shoulders and arms. I struggled in their grasp as they overwhelmed me. Then the lights went out. Chapter 15. You have any idea how dark a black room without windows is without any artificial lights? It's damn dark. With the lights came the inevitable screaming, gasping and stumbling, as people lost their balance and toppled into each other. Their cries stumbled over each other, as well as their bodies. Watch it. Help. Turn on the lights. Get the unbeliever. The unbeliever decided it was time to leave. I pulled myself from the flimsy grasps of the few worshippers who still held me, and stumbled forward into the table. My hands flailed around for some solace in the gloom, and I prayed for a miracle. I got one when my vampire senses kicked in, and the world brightened. It was as though someone gave me night vision goggles that didn't have that hideous green color. Darkness was now shadows, and screaming was now people in a panic as they bumped into each other and the columns.
What's going on?
I heard Eric call behind me. I grabbed him and pulled him off the table. Hey! Let go, he demanded.
You'll thank me later, I quipped.
I turned to the front door, but a burly shape blocked the entrance. A hand fell on my shoulder, and I felt something slithery slide down my arm. I yanked my arm from their grasp and turned to find a tall shape close beside me. Their red eyes glowed in the complete darkness, and I didn't need 3 guesses to figure out who it was. Sin's voice came out in a low hissing drawl. Going somewhere? Yep, I replied and did the only thing I could think of. I spread 2 fingers apart on one hand and poked those lights. Sin screamed and clutched at his eyes. I pushed past him with the Eric in my grasp. He stumbled behind me, as I led us to the door from which he'd entered. We burst through it, and into an office. Judging by the creepy decor of paintings with screaming people, and a glass case full of various skulls, I guessed this was Sin's office. My frantic mind realized there had to be an alternate route to escape the room. No madman would be caught dead without an escape plan. I slammed the door shut behind us, locked the deadbolt, and looked for an escape. Is there an elevator in here? I asked my captive. I don't know, and let go of me. Eric insisted. He grabbed my hand and tugged himself free. The young man stumbled back into a shadow, but it wasn't a shadow of evilness. Well, not quite. I recognized those dark eyes anywhere.
Where the hell have you been, Vince?
I've been trying to reach you since forever. I snapped at my partner. Vincent wrapped his hands around Eric's shoulders and stuck the boy in place in front of him. I was unaware our telepathic bond wouldn't work with one of us outside the building, he explained. I glared at him. You are so lucky the lights went out, or I would have come back from the dead to kill you. I was the one who switched out the lights, he revealed. One of my eyebrows rose up.
You switched out the lights?
How? Tim instructed me on the finer points of electronics and electricity, so I have cut the power to the building, he replied. Great, remind me to ask you to fix the toaster sometime.
Now do you know how to get us out of this room?
I questioned him.
No need to run, a voice spoke up.
I whipped my head to the floor, and my eyes bulged from my head when I noticed the puddle of darkness flow from the carpet. Eric, blind as he was in the darkness, turned his head toward the sound of Sin's voice.
Master Sins?
Master, where are you? He called out. I am here, my son, Sins replied. Sin stepped from the pool of darkness, but one of his tendrils raced across the floor to our target. I stomped the floor, but the thing only raced around my foot and reached Eric. It hit his shoe and stretched itself upward to slip beneath his pants. A second later, Eric's eyes rolled back and his knees buckled. Eric! I cried out. I caught him before he collapsed to the floor, and lowered him to the ground. Eric! Eric! I tapped his cheek with the back of my hand, but he didn't respond. I turned my attention to Sins, who calmly walked around us and over to the large desk at the rear of the room.
What did you do?
Sin seated himself in a large, high-backed black chair and shrugged. Merely put him to sleep. I don't want him to overhear our conversation and get the wrong idea about me. Like you're a scumbag demon worshipper who sacrifices people to your dark god. I quipped. Sins chuckled. No, that I am a dark god and satiate myself on the flesh of humans. At his statement, his shirt tore open and tendrils shot from his sides. His skin darkened to an ashen gray, and long pointed horns sprouted from the top of his head. He grew a foot taller, and when he leaned over his desk, he nearly leaned over his desk. This was Astaroth, god of darkness. I whipped my head to Vincent.
Forget to tell me something,
I growled. He shrugged.
It was a minor detail.
Astaroth turned his red eyes on Vincent. Now that I have shown myself, I must demand that you introduce me to your lovely companion, Vincent. This young woman must be your new partner I have heard about. I climbed to my feet and glared at the dark god.
The name's Liz Stokes, and you better not forget it.
Astaroth chuckled. You're quite feisty for a human newly introduced to our realm. Has Vincent not shown you the horrors he's capable of? I snorted. Have you smelled his breath? Nothing's worse than that. We only want the boy, nothing else, Vincent spoke up. I crossed my arms over my chest and frowned at my partner. Nothing else? This guy, God, was about to eat somebody. Like hell, I'm leaving and letting him get away with that. Astaroth leaned back against his chair and twined his fingers on both his hands around each other. They twisted and morphed like the tendrils that waved on either side of him.
It seems we are at an impasse.
You wish for the young man, and I wish for food. What do you say to a bargain? Vincent raised an eyebrow.
What do you have to trade?
Your silence and the boy for information on Riven and his recent dealings, Astaroth offered. We are already aware of his shipment of books, Vincent told him.
But did you know about what else happened before that first shipment hit the streets?
Who else died besides your precious male human? Astaroth mused. Why would another death concern us? Vincent argued. Astaroth chuckled. Then it seems you don't know, but I won't tell you without your agreeing to the deal. Do we have our compromise? The boy, and your silence for my information?
We have an agreement, Vincent replied.
Hell no. I'm not. Vincent grabbed me and pressed my back against his chest. His cold, thin hand clamped over my mouth. Continue, Vincent told our host. Astaroth bowed his head. Very well. Before the first shipment hit the streets, one of the witches of the West Side was murdered. Hilda was her name. I felt Vincent stiffen, and Astaroth chuckled.
I see you know the name.
I heard from a reliable source that Tim was friends with this Hilda, and may have given her information that led to both their deaths. Is that information satisfactory to our deal?
Very, Vincent agreed.
He released me, and hefted Eric over his shoulder.
No deal.
I didn't save this guy's life just so he could dine on somebody else. I insisted. Quiet, Vincent ordered me. Hell no. He was going to make mincemeat human pie out of this guy, and you want us to just walk off? I screamed at him. Trust me, Vincent persisted. I snorted. Like I'm. Just this once, trust me. I jerked back in surprise and blinked at Vincent. He ignored me and turned to Astaroth. It wouldn't look good if we left through the public elevator, he pointed out. Astaroth used one of his tendrils to point to a wall to our left, while another pressed a button beneath his desk. The wall slid open to reveal a secret hallway. Through there are some stairs that will lead you to a rear door in the building. Vincent bowed his head and strode past me to the secret hall. I glared one last time at Astaroth, but he merely smiled and bowed his head in return. His tendrils waved goodbye to me, and I hurried after Vincent. Chapter 16. The wall shut behind me, and the hallway was pitch black, and there was only a single door at the end. No windows and no other doorways. He sped down the hall in all his long legginess, and I had trouble catching up to him. Mind telling me why I should trust you? I questioned him. We must hurry, he replied.
What's the? My half-finished question was answered when a laugh boomed over an intercom.
Vince stopped dead in his tracks and I crashed into his solid back. My face bumped into the back of Eric's head, and I went sprawling onto the floor behind them.
What the hell?
I growled. Did you honestly believe I would just let you leave? Astaroth's voice called over the intercom. Now I can show you, Miss Liz Stokes, what your partner is truly capable of. Vincent turned and dropped Eric onto my lap. Oomph! I yelped. The guy was heavier than he looked. Stay still, Vincent ordered me. But what? Again Astaroth interrupted my question. This time, it was because of the countless dark portals that appeared on the walls, ceiling, and on the floor in front and behind us. From the black depths emerged Astaroth's tendrils. Their ends sharpened to points, and the slithery creatures snaked their way towards us. I pulled Eric closer to me, and scooted a little closer to Vincent, who stood nearby. "Okay, this is the last time we trust a demon," I shouted. Astaroth's laugh echoed around us. "I believe this is the last thing you ever do," he pointed out. Vincent stepped closer to me and grasped his ringed hand in his other one.
"Hold still," he repeated.
I glanced up at him.
"What are you?"
Vincent joined in, interrupting me, as his ring and mine glowed brightly. Their lights illuminated the space around us, and covered the three of us in a protective bubble of prettiness, 6 inches thick. The walls shimmered like ice crystals on a clear, cool, sunny day, and within the walls were reflected our enemies and ourselves. Vincent shoved his hands into the light and winced when his flesh sizzled and smoke rose from his fingers. He ground his teeth together, and I saw that his eyes were no longer red but a clear crystal blue like the wall. My mouth slowly dropped open as sharp crystal icicles emerged from our bubble and protruded outward. They shimmered in their own light and pointed toward the incoming tendrils. When the first tendril touched our bubble, it was as though someone had slammed their hand against the side of a barn with the eaves full of icicles. The sharp stakes flew from our bubble and stabbed the tendrils. They pinned the creatures to the ground, and the tendrils writhed in agony. The slightest touch by the icicles sent a wave of blue color up their thin, twisting bodies, and as the tendrils moved, they broke themselves into millions of pieces. The pieces fizzled into puffs of dark clouds that rose up and disappeared into the air. In the background, I could hear Astaroth screaming in rage as his precious tendrils were burned to steam. The hallway was a haze of those dark clouds, and even with the bright light of the barrier, I couldn't see a foot beyond the walls. Some of the tendrils broke through the onslaught, and they burst through the clouds and slammed themselves against the barrier. The walls shook and I clutched onto Eric. Vincent grimaced and winced at each blow, and the light around our rings flickered and dimmed. "Enough of this!" Astaroth screamed. I gasped when a large tendril, 5 times the size of the others, emerged from the clouds. It slammed its body against the wall, and the barrier shrank by a foot. Vincent fell to one knee and blood dripped from his hands and onto the floor. He closed his eyes and willed more icicle daggers from the barrier, but the creature slid over the wall and broke them off before they could launch. "Don't you dare give up on me now. I'm not dying in this dingy hall," I yelled at him. I set Eric on the ground and crawled over to Vincent. His body shook with the effort of retaining the bubble, and his sharp teeth bit deep into his lips. The light on our rings was fading fast when I did the only thing I could think of doing. I shoved my hands through the bubble just over his hands, wrapped my palms over his hands. I grasped his fingers tightly and pressed my side against his. The light from our rings brightened to nearly as bright when we joined our lives together. I squinted my eyes and focused my thoughts on the wall below the massive creature. The haze of darkness lifted enough so I could see its body stretched from the wall to our left. "Hit the wall," I ordered Vincent. He nodded, and one of the icicles pushed forth from the barrier wall. I tried to help, but there didn't seem to be any results. "How do you work these things?" "Focus on the shape and the point of impact," he instructed me. I did as he instructed, and growth the icicle in front of us increased tenfold. It sprouted to 3 feet in a second, and the creature reared up away from the pointy danger. My gaze flickered to the spot on the wall, and the next moment the icicle shot from the barrier and stuck into the wall. The creature screamed and writhed like its smaller brethren had done as the crystals raced up its body. It gave a hard flail and broke itself from the wall. The thing dropped hard to the ground and shook the whole hallway. Vincent gasped and his arms fell to his sides. The barrier fell around us, and I dropped my own weary limbs. I gasped for breath, my arms felt like 100-pound weights, and the ring on my finger pinched hard. Battling a hellish hell demon really took it out of a girl. Vincent pulled away from me and to Eric. He swung the young man's body over one shoulder and struggled to his feet. "We must leave." I propped his heavy side up with my shoulder and pulled him forward. "I'll second that motion," I agreed. We reached the door and Vincent kicked it open. Astaroth hadn't lied when he said it led to stairs, and we followed them down to a rear entrance to the building. Just around the corner was the car. Vincent dropped Eric in the back seat and shuffled around the rear to the driver's seat. I grabbed his shoulders and directed him around the front to the passenger seat. "I'm not living through that just to die from you driving me to an early grave," I quipped.
"But you can't drive it?"
"I'll be sure to do my best granny impersonation. Now sit." I shoved him into his seat, buckled him in and took my position behind the wheel. I creaked us out of the alley between Nightmare Tower and the office tower building beside it. There was no traffic, which was great, because sometimes the car would jump forward and propel us into the other lane. After a few blocks the going got easier, and I risked a glance at Vincent. He sat slumped in his chair with his charred hands in his lap. They were partially healed, but blood still covered his scorched skin.
"You going to be okay?"
I asked him. He gave a nod of his head.
"Need me to kiss it and make it better?"
He grunted, which I took for a laugh. "I would rather you didn't," he commented. I shrugged.
"Just trying to help."
"So you think we really hurt Astaroth?" "He didn't stop us from going out the door," I mused. Vincent sat up and sighed. "We caused him pain, but he will live." I frowned. "Damn. That means he going to get away with eating more people, and we didn't stop him," I reminded him. Vincent pulled out a VHS tape and held it out to me. I grabbed it and turned it over in my hands, but there wasn't any label.
"What's this?"
"The surveillance tape of the sacrifice room. I acquired a copy of it before I shut off the power," he explained. I held the VHS tape up to him.
"So we do what with this?"
"Give it to the police?" I asked him. "The Para Squad patrols more than just the underground when they have evidence of a supernatural crime. They will be very interested to know about Astaroth's dealings with humans," Vincent reminded me. A smile slid onto my lips. "You sneaky devil. You know, if I wasn't driving, I'd give you a kiss right now." "Then I am grateful you are driving," he returned. I laughed.
"Well, that's a first. You thankful for me doing something?"
"Do not grow accustomed to it," he warned me. I shrugged, but the smile didn't fall off my face. After surviving that horror, I don't think I can get mad at any insulting thing you could say right now. My brow furrowed when I recalled the reason for our salvation.
"What was that bubble thing you did anyway?"
I asked him. "It is a protection barrier, meant to protect the human partner from harm. Tim instructed me on how I could focus our telepathic link and use the barrier to both our advantages," Vincent explained. "Tim taught you a lot. He must have really trusted you," I mused. "Perhaps," was his uncertain reply. I wagged my ring finger, which lay atop the steering wheel. "Any other cool thing this little ring can do?" "Much, but nothing you need to know until the time comes. As I warned before, the power of the ring should be used sparingly," Vincent answered. I sighed and gave a side glance at him.
"Well, you have to admit I did pretty well tonight."
"Without my help we might have been tenderized by tendrils."
"You did adequate," he admitted.
I snorted. "I guess I'll take that as an improvement in our trapped relationship." I nodded back at our guest.
"Now what do we do with him?"
"We contact our client and return her lost pet," he explained.
"And be done with this mess."
Vincent turned his face away from me and out the window. My shoulders slumped.
"We're not done with this mess, are we?"
"It's about what Astaroth said, isn't it?"
"Yes." "What can you make of it?"
"You know this witch he mentioned?"
"Yes."
"And we're going to get into another mess, figuring out her angle in Tim's death, aren't we?"
"Yes."
I sighed. "All right, we're off to another adventure."